I'd like to call to order City Council meeting August 14, 2018. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance by Jay Thomas.
Please rise. Repeat after me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'd like to welcome everyone out to our Truth and Taxation public hearing. Let me begin by reading a statement. Citizens are permitted to address the council concerning the proposal to increase the city's property tax rate for fiscal year 2018-2019, over which the council has jurisdiction. The council will allow 3 minutes to do so during this period. Written comments may be submitted if a citizen does not wish to speak. Please provide your name for the record, and if you desire for further contact, please take a city clerk's card from the lectern, so later follow-up can take place. Persons who exceed the time or are otherwise disorderly may be expelled by the council upon a 2/3 majority vote, as provided in Utah Code Annotated 10-3-608. The council requires that citizens help maintain the decorum of the meeting by not applauding or booing, turning off electronic devices, not engaging in verbal attacks against others, or being disrespectful during the proceedings of the meeting. Following public comments, staff will be allowed to respond as necessary for clarification. So beginning with item 3A, receive public input and consider for approval Resolution 18-139, consider an increase in property tax rates, adopting the tax rate for the 2018 calendar year for the city of West Jordan. And we'll turn the time over to David Brickey, our city manager.
Side of the lectern, so most of these people who are coming to hear are here to hear my story of what's going on through the slide presentation. Our speakers, there it is, I can hear it now. So I'll start over. I'm going to turn the mic over and talk to the audience because you've seen this presentation probably no less than 3 times. There's some slight changes, but I really would like to hear or allow them to hear and see my face while I'm talking to them. I don't mean disrespect. My name's David Brickey. I'm the city manager. This is a wonderful opportunity for me to come and defend this municipality's responsibility and explanation for why we're asking for this property increase. I used to be a prosecutor in my previous life, and for 24 years, I'd start a jury trial by telling people where we've been, so justify where we're going to get to. So I think it's with a little bit of background that I start this story by telling you that in 1985, a gentleman by the name of became a senator, Howard Stevenson, pushed a bill through the legislature that required truth in taxation as a process before increasing any property taxing amounts. Back in 1990, prior to the first time the enactment, or first time the city tried raising taxes after the 85, the population was 47,800. Today, that population is 114,000. The next time the city has a census bureau, it is anticipated that the city will move to the 3rd largest in the state of Utah. What does that mean? Well, the reality is in 1988, when we had our very first tax increase, or truth and taxation hearing, $1,000 was not the same, or it was $1,000 changed. Today, it's worth $476. Gasoline was 93 cents a gallon. Today, it's over $3. The inflation you can see each year can be as high as 6%, and as low as, I think over there on 2009, almost 10%. But the average of that inflation is roughly 2.7% over 30 years. The significance of that is in 1988, when the first tax hearing occurred right here, that amount that we were allowed to collect on property tax stayed stable until 2002, when they increased it again and went up a little bit to address for inflation. 6 years later, we're now asking this council to consider raising it as much as 20%. You can see that the dollar amounts of what was collected in roughly 1988, a little over $200, we're now asking for something like $335. It has not kept pace with inflation. That is a young lobbyist, Howard Stevenson, who said at the time when this was enacted, the purpose behind the Truth in Taxation was to have every 5 to 8 years an opportunity for the citizens to come together and advise their elected officials how willing are they to match inflation. That's the reality of what was imposed 35 years ago. This represents the current dollar that is collected by from each resident. There's an assumption that that dollar ends up in this city. That's not the case. The city is getting, the city is getting 15 cents. That's the total amount that the city is utilizing for every dollar collected. We're getting by and doing pretty good with very little. We have established on our webpage verification that you can go home and plug into and know exactly what it is you're going to pay presently, as well as in the future, depending on what the amount of this council's increase, if they impose any increase. Does Truth in Taxation work? There's a recent article in the Salt Lake Tribune that indicated it may have worked too well. Senator Stevenson, now having been elected to serve in the Senate, acknowledged that a lot of elected officials hate this process. It's very difficult to, having made a pledge to run on a particular platform and then come to you folks and ask for your hard-earned money. I guarantee you not one individual who sits up on this dais ran with a pledge to raise your taxes. If the city were to impose a 20% increase on property tax, the overall effect on your entire taxes is 3% of an increase. What we're talking about is from 15 cents to 18 cents. What does that 3 cents represent? It's about $55 increase, or a total of $335. What do $55 represent? That's a difference. That's what our ambulance crew is going to need when they respond to your home to address a heart attack victim or any type of injury that requires an IV. Additionally, the entire amount of $335 represents a half of a vest that our police officers wear. I wonder if our officers, if I may just step away for a visual help, would care to go out and defend their city wearing just one half of a vest. I'm asking for the entire amount so it pays for the entire vest. Now, the entire 20% that is being discussed has been narrowed down to these choices. This entire process started very early in the year, as far back as December, and in amounts that were originally requested as much as $8 million. We've narrowed it down to the amounts that you see in front of you now, and the council can adjust them even more. But you can see that the original request that I made, there are 4 items at the bottom that have been struck. Those items will not be included, even if a 20% increase is approved. The council has the ability tonight to literally move those items around. This represents more or less the current council's position as it stood a day or a week ago, but they have the right to move things around. At this point, it's going to be up to you folks to share with the council your opinions, and so I do appreciate you coming out tonight. As we proceed into the evening, if there are questions you have, the staff will do the best they can to try to answer them. I appreciate you coming out tonight.
I'm going to now open this up for public comment, but before I have anybody come up to the podium, I've been asked to read a letter that someone sent in that is unable to be here tonight, but they wanted to have their thoughts read into the record. This is dated August 13th, 2018, reference tax increase for West Jordan. My husband and I support a tax increase for West Jordan City if it is to facilitate staffing more police officers and firefighters, as well as to provide for better code enforcement in our neighborhoods. We are concerned that our neighborhoods are not being patrolled as frequently as they should be, and there should be better code enforcement for the local homes. We currently have a house in a neighborhood zoned for single family. Within our neighborhood, a home is being remodeled with an outside entrance to turn it into a duplex. There are many other rentals in the neighborhood where numerous people, families, are living in them with 6 to 8 automobiles parked around them in the evening hours. Trailers are being parked in front of homes for months. We are unable to get more than one car down the road because of the multiple cars on each side. It would be near impossible for a fire engine or other emergency crew to drive through this. We have lived in West Jordan for 40 plus years. We love West Jordan and would like our neighborhood to remain safe as well as to remain single-family dwelling as it has been. Thank you, Mike and Patty Miranda, 1953 West Singing Wood Court. Are these folks that have signed up? I have a list of folks that have signed up, so to begin with, we'll go through these, and then if there are others that wish to speak after these that have signed up, please, you'll come up to the podium at that time. We'll start with Jamie Bevelheimer. Please come to the lectern.
Do I start now?
Please.
Okay. My name is Jamie Bevelheimer, and I live at 6782 South Dixie Drive in West Jordan. I am a widow, disabled, and I have lived in West Jordan for 42 years. I have courage to speak. My income is less than $14,000 a year, not because of choice. I challenge you to live on that amount of money. No raises, etc. I am worse off than 30 years ago. I believe the city has more than enough money from the citizens. I will repeat, I believe the city has more than enough money from the citizens. I am offended by the example of the vest. I admire and respect the city manager more than he ever knows, but I am offended. As an example, I wonder if you even remember as a council, you didn't honor your offer of $5,000 to me after I tripped on a city sidewalk, which you fixed. Putting my teeth through my lip, broken teeth, infection throughout my body. Since then, I've been very ill because of tooth infection, etc. I believe your reality is, unless you are in government, citizens have no choice. We are made to believe we lose. What is the waste in this city? What is really needed? I don't have a golden checkbook. I don't believe the city needs a golden checkbook funded by the citizens. Do you listen to the citizens? Do you have special interest groups? I believe you do. Whatever project, $1 million project that doesn't need to be funded, whatever project is important to you individually or as a group. There is no one in the city that the city needs to be accountable to. You are accountable to the citizens. And if you believe a higher power, I will say again, I wonder if in all your doings, expenses, projects, etc., you can in your heart and soul say you are honoring all citizens in West Jordan, neighbors, your neighbors, and you don't waste, abuse, or misspend. I am saying as a citizen, I do not believe the sewer, water, fees, taxes, etc. need to be raised. I am sure you will find the money somewhere else in the budget. It has been done before. Responsibility is yours. Thank you.
David Brickell.
Mr. Mayor, distinguished members of the City Council, I appreciate this opportunity to come before you and speak tonight. My name is David Brickell. I've lived at 6250 South Dewdrops Road since 1992, and at that time it was a part of Kearns, or the county, and it became a member of the city of West Jordan, and we were ecstatic when that occurred. I want to stand up here before you tonight and voice my support for raising the city taxes, or property taxes. I've worked for the city, and I know where our money is being spent. I know that working for some of the people, the great strides they take in controlling our finances and trying to spend it efficiently with keeping the citizens of West Jordan in mind. I also know that as members of our city government, we also compete with private sectors as well as other city governments for some of our people who fill our positions within our government. I know that we have to keep up with pay, we have to keep up with benefits so that we can keep these tenured employees within the city and not lose them to other entities. I also know that there are things that need to be done within the city. I drive around to other cities and I see roads are in need of repair. We have many parks that need to be maintained and kept up for our children, maintained in safety. And I know that we are working to try to build our city so that we can encourage other businesses and other people to move in to also help with our tax base. But the reality is that as inflation grows, we need to pay, we need to increase benefits, we need to do work in our city, so we do need to step up as citizens and pay. It's not you that are paying, it's we the citizens. We are the city, and it is our responsibility to take responsibility to do these things for our city. If we're not going to step up, then these things aren't going to be done, and we can't step back and complain about it. We need to be at the forefront and take that responsibility. Thank you for the time.
Is it Mike Rigby? Mike, 8431 South Town View. Sorry, Mike, I couldn't quite read your last name there.
Yep, Mike Rigby. Just want to address this council and tell you how this affects me. It affects me 3 different ways. I've got my personal home, which is going to be increasing 20%. I've got my business, which is also being taxed in 2 different ways. One on some property that we are renting, and also on some property that we own. So it hits me hard. Also makes me want to leave. Makes me want to leave the city. Makes me want to move out when I see huge increases like this. So I don't know how other businesses feel, but it makes me want to move. So with that said, with what I'm seeing right now, we have property values increased by 14 to 21% throughout West Jordan and the Valley. We have a larger tax base than we've ever had. You saw in that graph, We've gone from 48,000 people all the way up to over 100,000 people that are paying into this pool. And we certainly don't need to increase our taxes this much. We need an audit. We need to figure out why we have so much money leaking out in certain ways. When I run a business, when I'm struggling and my business is struggling, I have to balance the books. I have to figure out where the money is going and where it shouldn't be going. And I have to cut. I have to find where we have needs and where we have wants. And I think we have a lot of wants that we need to get rid of. I think that every cent, if you guys do increase this, needs to be audited. We need to know everything. We need to know where the money goes, including salaries, including if it's going to go to, police officers, I want to know that. I want to see that. And I think that's a very important thing, that we can be very upfront with our citizens in how we spend their hard-earned money, because some of us get hit really hard when you increase it by 20%, and it's really more like 60% to me, so. Thank you.
Dick Humphreys.
I don't know if to stand short enough. Mayor Riding and city council members, I'm so happy to be able to be with you tonight, and thank you in advance for hearing my concerns. I am a senior citizen and I've lived in West Jordan for 40 years. I'm retired. I live on a fixed income. I paid off our home 5 years ago, and I need to follow a budget for my expenses. I'm not debt-free. I am debt-free except for a car that took me 20 years to buy. I finally bought one new. That does not mean I'm a cash cow that you can tap for taxes anytime you want. Your proposal for property taxes have jumped. It means that I will pay approximately this year $1,804, and with the increases, it will go to approximately $2,139.45. I agree that our fire and departments and our police need to have good salaries. They are good men, they work hard, and I'm proud of them. I'm proud of West Jordan. I love it here, or I wouldn't have lived here for 40 years. I also have to pay school assessments, which you have nothing to do with, but every year it goes up. I can't spend any more money. It's coming out of my pocket. I'm the only breadwinner in my home. I strive hard to be a good citizen, and I hope that, and I want you to know that I'm against this property tax increase. It is not going to help me. I have my mother-in-law right now in Beehive Homes. It costs us $3,800 a month to keep her in that home. She cannot leave. Her dementia is worse, and we're paying those fees. Thank you for listening to my concerns.
Dwayne Harding.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council, and citizens of West Jordan. I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. I appreciate the comments so far that have been so eloquently expressed. I'd like to express my opinion, and I'd like to express that opinion in favor of the tax increase, simply because I think it's really badly needed. We have quite a city here. I've been here about 36 years. And I love West Jordan, but gosh, we're the fourth largest city in the state now and have the potential for very much, additional growth. We will soon be the third largest city, within West Jordan. And it takes money to run a city, especially as it gets bigger. I understand that most of the money is going to be used to hire more policemen, The money's also going to be used to hire more firemen and also personnel to work in our criminal justice system. These are really, really important quality of life issues. And, you know, we need these people, and therefore, you know, I am in favor of the tax increase. Is this tax increase reasonable? Well, I believe it is. I got on the Sandy website, and they had a chart that was quite interesting. They ranked the tax rates for all the cities within the Salt Lake Valley. There's 17 cities in Salt Lake Valley, okay? And what they did is they took a home at $300,000 and they calculated what the city tax would be for a home of that size. Okay, so West Jordan ranks only 9th as, you know, the number 9 most expensive out of 17. When we initiate this tax increase, that'll raise them up a notch to number 8. So I think it's very reasonable. You know, what we're being taxed is very reasonable. I think that West Jordan does a pretty good job of how they spend their money, as evident by the fact that we have not necessitated a tax increase for quite some time. Also, here's another thing to consider. Some cities like Sandy, their property tax rate is quite low, and that's because they generate a lot of revenue through sales tax. If we improve our city and keep it maintained and provide things like police protection and fire protection, these things will attract businesses to West Jordan City, and maybe someday we too can generate enough sales tax that we can actually lower the property tax, you know, for the citizens of West Jordan. When a city locates, you know, in a particular area, a lot is said about how much they consider property taxes. So, okay. Well, anyway, I support this tax, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Dennis Hamlin.
Thank you. Mayor, City Council, I'm Dennis Hamlin and live at 1386 West Fox Point Drive. Grateful to be here tonight and talk to you. I know this is a very difficult thing to get all of the needs of the city's package in the budget. It meets the needs of the city and it considers the needs of the citizens and their financial well-being. I can say that I've had great interactions with police and fire, public safety personnel. Appreciate them very much. I'm grateful for the service we receive. One of the things I'm concerned about, though, is there's a couple of other taxing entities that are asking increases in this budget year with the Conservancy District and the Central Utah Water Project, along with West Jordan. You know, if you add those together, it starts to add up a little bit. And what I worry about is the school district, which is the major funding for all of these taxes, and I worry where that's going with the growth in the Jordan School District. But I support the need for the things that the city needs for the operation of the city. I would hope, though, that we can do things more incrementally rather than a big 20% hit. We would do it maybe in smaller increments as the years go on so that we don't have one big hit, 8 or 9 or 10 years or whatever it is out there, that we do that in smaller increments. I guess that would be my comment. Thank you.
Jeff Black.
Thank you very much for allowing me to do this. I don't come to city council meetings very often, so this is an interesting process. So thank you for allowing me to be here. As you said, my name is Jeff Black. I'm a husband and a father. I've lived in West Jordan for 12 years, and I freely admit I'm somewhat ignorant in regards to politics and taxation and how to run a city. I've never tried to do that. However, I'm not ignorant of the fact that in my home, my family does live on a budget. If I don't have the money, I don't do it. If I ask my boss tomorrow for a raise because my property taxes are going to increase, I probably would not get a raise. And so I have to make do with the money that I have. Therefore, my income is not going to increase, so I would ask you to not increase my tax burden. If this was not the only increase on the proposed property tax list of increases, it probably wouldn't be too bad. But I was looking at the notification, and every single category is increasing. So I would ask that you please don't be a part of that increase. Just kind of do your best and leave things as they are. Thank you very much.
Tracy Williams.
I'm not probably as brave as you are getting up and talking in front of people. Mostly, I've been a police officer for 10 years. I'm not so good at speaking in public, but I'm a resident of West Jordan. I live at 4956 Rushville Drive. And I'm also a police officer for the city of West Jordan. And my concern is just the response time from police. We're getting to a point where we're trying to go east and west in patrol, and I think it would be a lot more effective if we had a few more bodies out there on the road to be able to go east and west. And so when I'm asking for a back, they're not coming from so far away.
Sorry. There's something wrong with this one.
Okay, that's fine. So I kind of see the need for more police and fire. You know, the other day we spent quite a long time for fire to get on a call, and with the infrastructure the way it is and new lights going in and new subdivisions going in, it's a lot harder to travel the city and get to the calls in a timely manner. And I think more manpower would help out with that. Although I'm sympathetic to the people that, you know, that can't afford an increase. I see the need for it within our city, and I just hope that you would consider that. Thanks.
Martin Dennison.
I don't have a whole lot to say, but I'd like to maybe take some time and maybe ask some questions later on. One of the things I'm wondering about is I want to kind of understand, what is the per capita cost and how is that related? My first impression was when I've heard of this, I'm thinking, yeah, so we have to have more policemen, but has the per capita revenues been going up, or have they been going down? And so I just want to make sure I understand. David Bricky showed this chart, showing the, I guess the average taxation per property and how it compared with inflation. And I just want to make sure I understand that. I know ours hasn't been exactly flat, even though we're having a certain rate, and so I just want to understand that. So I'm not necessarily against it, I just want to make sure I understand. Thank you.
Eldon Rich.
You're only going to give me 3 minutes, huh? Oh, boy. Okay. I am 100% against any tax increase. And I'll tell you why. Number one, it's not only your taxes that I'm paying for West Jordan, but I'm paying for all the illegals that are in this country that's taking up the money that I'm paying out of my pocket to keep the schools going. And right now, I'm paying over $750 for schools just to keep the illegals in school. That's number one. So that's one of the taxes that we've got. I'm very, very upset about the fact that the mayor and some of the mayoral presidents want us to now pay, which we will eventually do within the next few years, start paying for the homeless people, because we don't have a house in our area right there. It's not your tax, it's everybody's taxes. The state of Utah is out of whack with what's going on in the world. The people of Utah, based upon news articles, based upon business associates that I have, are flatly saying that people do not have the money to even live the way they would really like to. People are changing jobs like nobody's business, according to the news people, simply because they're trying to find a higher paying job because they can't make it on what they're making right now. And so what I would like to suggest is that you people have spent all this time campaigning to come into here and become council people and mayor, and thank goodness we got a good mayor this time. Okay, but let's get the thinking going. Let's get creative. Let's find out how we can do better without a tax increase. You're killing us, literally. I do not work. I am retired, and my retirement does not go up every year so we can pay $400 or $500 for your taxes. The schools are killing us with everything that we have. We need a little bit of good thinking. We need you to be able to do what you can do with the budget you've got. We cannot be kicked in the head every 3 years, every 2 years, asking for more money because you cannot control the illegal people that are coming in that we're paying for. It's coming out of our pocket. We not only pay for our own families, but we pay for the people that are coming into this country that are not citizens. And we're supposed to be doing this. I still got 10 minutes of stuff to give to you. And I can tell by the expression on your face you're not going to do it. But please, I hope you'll understand where I'm coming from.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Colleen Laird.
Hi, my name is Colleen Laird, and I live at 2405 West Harvest Lane. I want to first thank all of you. I know being on the council is not an easy job, but you know, doing a budget's not an easy job. All of us know that from our own personal experiences. But I think all of us also recognize that there are wants and there are needs. And I don't think any of us really that are here tonight would argue with the fact that we want a sufficient police force and we want a sufficient fire force. So then the question becomes, well then, how do we have that without having to constantly raise taxes? And so I would suggest, and I would hope, that you would take a look at all of our wants and our needs and say, well, how are we going to divide those? Clearly, the police and the firemen are on the needs. So what are the wants? Well, do all of the fees that we have, it's my understanding that our city's fees aren't in line with others as far as building inspector fees or fees to hook up some of our utilities. I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert on that. I really am not, but that's just my understanding that we are probably a little low on some of those things. And so they don't pay for themselves, so we have to pull money from someplace else. It's my understanding that a lot of our recreation and entertainment programs that are great to have, but are they a need? That they don't pay for themselves. For a long time we were told before the soccer fields came what a wonderful thing it would be and how much revenue it would bring to the city. And you all know much better than I do, but my impression is that hasn't been the case, that really it's more like it's a money pit, that costs us a lot. So maybe that's where we need to start, is looking at all the wants and saying, can we make some changes there before we ask people to have to do that in their own lives, which is what many people will have to do if we indeed raise the taxes. So I hope you'll take a look at the entertainment things. I have concerns about the new arts center, the ongoing costs for it, the soccer field, some of the other things that are really great, fun to have, but not if I can't afford them. So thank you, and thank you again for all you do.
Thank you. Jack Bloom.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. Appreciate the opportunity to speak before you today. I guess I have two things to say. The first is I just feel like a 20% increase in property tax rate is excessive and not reasonable. and I think you should reconsider that. I do believe, as many others have said, that those of us that are on either fixed income or limited incomes, it's a pretty sizable increase, and I think it should be reconsidered. And then the second point I would make is that I'm not sure that we really need to increase size of police and fire forces as large as you're currently proposing, but I do have an initial question. In the reading I've done, I've read that it could be 10 police officers that are added, but then yet I've read elsewhere that it's 5. What is the correct number? It's 5. So in the initial proposition, which I have here, the proposed expenditure, it was listed as 10, so that's no longer accurate, is that correct? Okay. And as far as the justification for that, when I read here the reason why it was being requested, it says that between 2012 and 2018, I assume, we added about 14 authorized officers, and those would be officers within the investigation division and the patrol division. So that's roughly 2 per year that we've had since 2012. And now we're seeking, at least double that, asking for 5. Again, I question, is that really necessary? Is it really justified to ask for such a larger number? And then as far as the fire department goes, they're asking for 9 new fire members. And again, it seems like a substantial increase. I don't have numbers on what has been their increased level in the last half dozen years or so, but I really wonder if it's been that large. And in reading about their request, it was indicated in the West Jordan Journal, let me find this for you if I can. Anyway, that we have, I believe, 4 fire stations, of which 2 of them have ambulances that are idled, unable to man them properly. And yet I kind of question that. We have, as I recollected when I did a head count, about 76 fire officers or fire people in the operations group, of which almost 50% are paramedics. And so I kind of question, if you have half of them as paramedics, why are you having to idle 2 of the ambulances throughout the city during the hours of operation? I'm not sure of that. The other comment I would make about the fire officials, the city's website has a 2017 video of a fire crew being deployed to California. And so again, I kind of question, why are we deploying our fire resources to California if in fact we're idling or leaving some of our vehicles idle here? So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
That's all that I have that have signed up. Are there others who would, oh, excuse me, here comes one. Trina Sharp.
Thank you. Sorry I walked in a few minutes late. I live at 1326 West. Sunburst Drive, thank you. I'm a little nervous. I just wanted to come and address the council. I am currently a crossing guard and have been a crossing guard for 4 years. And I have loved it, and I have loved being a member of the crossing guard. But it's so hard because there's not enough support. There's not enough crossing guards because it doesn't pay well enough or whatever reason. And so as a crossing guard, it's hard to want to continue to be a crossing guard when you don't even have subs for when you're sick or for when you want to go on vacation. And so it's really hard to function when you don't have enough manpower to function. And it's something that's been a problem ever since I've been in, which is 4 years. But because I did start as a sub, so when I did start, we did have subs. But that's just something that I know is on the top of the list from what I've heard. But it also just seems pointless to have ambulances that we can't use because we don't have the manpower, because some of those accidents, time is truly of the essence, and you need to get to those people and get them to where they need to go. I don't really have a whole lot to say. I don't want to take too much time, but I know it's important to have those police be able to respond to those calls, and from the sounds of it, they're not able to get out to where they need to go in time. And I've had to call the cops before because our car's been broken into at least 2 or 3 times since we moved to West Jordan. And it's not a huge deal because it's annoying that you have to wait so long for a police officer to get there. And obviously, there's nothing urgent, thankfully, but if there was something urgent, it would be nice to have the police be able to respond more quickly. But I appreciate your time, and I understand how difficult of a decision this will be. So I'm glad that you gave me a chance to speak.
Thank you. With that, I will invite anyone else that would like to address council to please come forward.
My name is Jay Thomas. I'm in support of raising taxes. I'm not one for wanting just to give money away, but for our public safety and for our city's safety, I think it's critical. I don't know if you guys know, but we actually lost a firefighter yesterday, a Utah firefighter with 20 plus years experience. That's hard to make up for those kind of experience and that kind of manpower. With the police and fire, that's just another indication of how important and how dangerous that job is. And if we do not adequately fund those positions, we're not going to get adequate people. And we need to make sure that we protect our citizens. The first priority you guys have up there on the dais is to protect the citizens of this community. And that is very, very important, and I think you guys should take that into consideration. Some of the staffing levels, now I'm a retired firefighter, so I do know a little bit of the inners and outers of public safety. But it is sad that we cannot staff all of our ambulances, and just like what has been previously stated, sometimes seconds does count. You may not think only a few seconds or we can rely on somebody else, but that's not always going to be the case. So I'm in support of it, but just remember that it is for the public safety, and it is your responsibility, as all of our responsibility, to make sure that we do protect all of our citizens. That is #1 priority for you up there as the council and the mayor. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to come and address council?
My name is Chad Hahn. I live at 4877 West Mountain Laurel Lane. I've lived in West Jordan off and on for about 15 years. For the last 23 years, I've been a police officer for this city. During that time, I've been in many different areas, a lot of in patrol, and the last probably 10, 12 years I've spent in investigations division. Most of the information that you've been given about staffing levels in our police department include the patrol division, but they do not include what we deal with in investigations. Currently, I'm the supervisor, I'm the sergeant of our special victims squad, our sex crimes unit. For those, if anybody, God forbid, you've ever had to be involved in any of those cases at any level, they are horrific. If your children are involved in that, that's our primary caseload is child sex offense cases. I have 4 guys assigned to that. 4 detectives, each one of them carrying about 25 cases each, okay? To put it in perspective, UPD has 10 officers assigned to their special victims unit alone. West Valley has 10 as well. We are highly understaffed in our special victims. Those are the most horrific cases that you want an officer there and you want them to do the best job they can and you want it done quickly. We're talking about cases that are first-degree felonies, putting people in prison for the rest of their lives. And I don't have the people to do those cases. So, we are held accountable to be on calls, to be on scene, to help you, your families, or anybody else out as quick as possible. When it takes an hour for an officer to get there on a high-priority call, it's unacceptable from a citizen. But there's nothing we can do about it if we don't have the staffing. It's unacceptable for my guys not to make a call to that victim who's just been raped within a day and set up an interview, get them to counseling, help them through that process. But we can't. We don't have the people to do it. The fire department's no different. They have staffing levels too. They have to man the ambulance. I've had to have the fire department come to my house for my daughter. I want them there quickly. And even though I understand what's going on and understand what they have to do, every second counts. And that's a horrific experience to have one of your family members there in a medical crisis and you're having to wait critical moments for an ambulance to show up. And yes, we do go help other cities. The police department does the same. Everybody, all the cities are dealing with the same issues. And if we don't start fixing our problems with our police department and fire department, our guys are going to get burned out and they're going to go to these other cities. That's just the nature of the job. So yes, I'm on a budget too. Everybody's on a budget, but I am highly in support of this because it needs to happen. We have to support our police department and fire department. If we don't, the city's going to fail. Thanks.
We like people to just speak once, thank you. And so there will be an opportunity for staff to answer questions after everyone is finished. Is there anyone else who would like to address council? Please come forward.
My name is Fred Grummenhoek. I live in West Jordan, and I can understand people's concerns about tax increases. I also understand the expenditures that the city goes through and the money that they need to support the services. But the way I look at it is there an alternative to increasing taxes? One thing I can think of is we need more businesses coming into West Jordan rather than going to other cities surrounding this within the county. I'd like to hear what is being done to increase businesses coming into our city. That way our tax base will be the alternative to increasing taxes. And I'm not against the tax increase because it's needed, but I also like to know what the city is doing to increase businesses coming into our city, so our tax base will be a better one. Thank you very much.
Anyone else?
I'm not going to take up too much of your time. I'm Brandon Turner. I'm the current sitting president of the Fraternal Order of Police, and I'm also a patrol sergeant as well with West Jordan City. I've spoken to most of you, and one thing I haven't talked to you because it's more of a recent thing that has occurred, and I want to bring you guys to light of it as well, is the fact that we've actually had to split our dispatch channel as well because West Jordan had the most calls for service in the entire valley as far as the agencies that use VEC. So during our peak hours, which is usually around the swing shift time, we've actually had to take on 2 dispatch channels just because of the amount of calls for service. Speaking to you just from my membership, which is the majority of the police department, we are all in favor of this. And this is not a compensation thing for us. This is not raises. And I'm not even here to talk about retirement benefits. This is a staffing issue. On the patrol end of it, being a weekend graveyard sergeant, I've had to field more and more calls from the citizens of West Jordan, your constituents, on why we can't be there in the time that they call us. A lot of the times I just tell them to give your council member a call and then express the concerns to them as well. But the reality of the issue is we have domestic violence, physical domestic violence, where husbands and wives are beating each other up. We have the rapes that Chad Hahn had talked about previously. The reality of it is we have those priority calls, and it's taken us 3 and 4 hours to get to those people that have had their car broken into that are real victims. And I'm not saying that they're not real victims, but that's the reality of it is all of our guys and girls are on those higher priority calls, and we just can't get there in the amount of time that they want them to. So we plead to you at this time, and I've talked with most of you about this, to please approve this. Get us those officers that we need. And I know that there's a recruitment and retention issue that I'm not going to get into in 1 minute that I have, but this is a start for us. Let us recruit and retain the officers, but please help us out. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to address council?
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. My name is Keith Bronson. I live in the city as well. I am the day shift patrol sergeant, and so for years, I've been with the city for 20 years. I have supervised every shift, been in investigations, child abuse. So I'd like to echo what Sergeant Hahn has said. That is absolute truth. Struggling with manpower has been something that we have dealt with for a long time, especially in the patrol scenarios that we hear about. Every day I'm here looking at the screen where the calls that are holding. I am seeing those citizens that need our help, that need our contact, that we cannot get to. We cannot ask these officers to sacrifice their safety and the citizens to continue shouldering more risk while they wait for our response. Sure, these calls are prioritized and we get to them as quick as we can. But the more we push the officers, the more we're going to get into a terrible situation where an officer is injured or killed again. And we cannot have that. We need the staffing. We need to be able to do the things that the citizens are asking us to do. When people pay for police services or when they call us, they expect a response. And we're here ready to give it to them, except for another call that has our shift tied up. Even 2 officers. We're running nearly the same minimum manpower as we ran back in 1998 when I first hired with the city. We have not been able to improve that. And so while I'm taking into account officers who are hurt, who are sick, or who otherwise are unavailable to me for our shift, that's a really big deal that becomes a huge burden upon the shift and the services that we can offer the people that live here. And so I'm very proud of the effort that you've gone through to get us this far, and I would ask you as a citizen and as one of the officers who is managing that burden on a day-to-day level to pass this. Let's get where we need to be as a city so that we can take care of our police officers, we can take care of all the people that need us as soon as possible, or otherwise have a good explanation as to why they're waiting, extending out that risk was able to allow somebody in their family to be hurt or seriously injured, even killed, while we're trying to get over there because we're on another part of the city doing another important call. And thank you for your time.
Anyone else? Please come forward.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Kevin Williams. I live on 2858 Diamond Drive. I'm actually a part of Salt Lake County emergency management team. I will say that there's not a person in this city that does not want to have the best fire department and the best police department. But I'm asking you to do all the options instead of just going to the tax base. Why can't we have a liquor store? Why can't we have different businesses in here that bring tax bases to West Jordan? And let me tell you why. Anybody, whether you drink or you don't drink, if you go to the store, you go to Harmon's to Kearns, you go to Harmon's to South Jordan, you go to Harmon's to Taylorsville, and you go to Harmon's in Riverton, they're always going to the stores in the tax base and they stop at the liquor store, they stop at the store. Why can't West Jordan have a liquor store? They haven't had one in 40 years. 1. 2, the tax base in West Jordan, since I grew up in West Jordan when it started, the high school. I mean, from 78 on is all houses. So the tax base in West Jordan is, like the chart says, up to, what, 100 and something thousand people? That's money that West Jordan's getting. So please look at what the tax base is coming in and what the tax base is going out. I will tighten my belt up for West Jordan City. I mean, I work for the county. I've lost 401ks. I've lost cost 11 in 2008, but I will tighten my belt up. And again, you know, my dad owns this house in West Jordan. We lived over here for many years. Again, go to the tax base of people that are out there, the businesses. That's where you make your money, you know, or houses. You know, you get these apartments that you don't get no tax based off apartments. You get tax based on houses. So please listen to the residents. I mean, every one of you guys that are up there have been voted in. Now, I don't think anybody wanted you to raise taxes. Nobody wanted to raise taxes. And again, my last comment on here is, I bought my house in 1995, I think it was. Housing markets are 300. These houses that are going over here are $400,000. So I'm telling you right now, kids that are coming out of West Jordan High can't even buy a house in West Jordan or anywhere in this valley because they're so high. So how people get their tax base on $300,000 for houses is ridiculous, because I'm telling you, citizens can't afford it. And if you keep raising, I mean, you've raised the water up, you've raised, I paid $150 for water this year and my backyard's dying. Yet this park over here is greener than the green and nothing over there but grass. Put some businesses over there, or put something over there for the kids to do that bring in tax bases for West Jordan. That's all I'm asking you to do. And I've been around the world. I've been in the military. I've been around the world, and I've seen a lot of places. And I'm telling you, West Jordan is a good place to live. They got some of the best fire department. They got the best police department. But, you know, I can only tighten up my belt so much. So please, look at the whole picture. And I'm sure you had, I've never been to one of these. But, you know, I bet you have residents in here just furious about 70th South and all the wasted money that's going down there. You know, I mean, I understand it's, anyway, please look at the tax base. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the City Council at this time? Please come forward.
Thank you. My name is David Aldridge. I live at 6523 West, 7735 South. While the 20% is hard to swallow, I was sickened last month to learn that 2 of our ambulances are not being staffed, even a majority of the time at our fire department, and that their SCBA devices are out of code, essentially. So that being said, I am in support of giving the police department and the fire department the increases that they need to staff accordingly. But what I have a problem with is when we look through the line items of your proposed budget by the city manager, and there's waste beyond waste. One example is graffiti removal. $55,000 this year was spent. Line item, $296,000 for this next budget. Where's that 6-fold increase coming from? Reimbursement of mileage for cars, $1.60 per mile. The IRS federal reimbursement is 54.5 cents per mile. Why 3-fold increase on that? So there's a lot of items. Another one is the track station landscaping, over $200,000 for that. So there's a lot of items I think we could tighten as well to find without having to do a 20% increase. But I do think we do need an increase in order to give the men and women of the police department and the fire department what they need to do where they were sworn in to protect us as their citizens. So thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else to come up, I will close the public hearing and turn the time back to our city manager to respond with some clarifications on issues.
If I'm going to take some of these questions, and while I'm answering, I'll ask staff to get ready to answer others. Let me address the issue whether or not we're trying to attract business. Ken Anderson, who is our Economic Development Director, will tell you that we are currently, our citizens are spending more money outside the city than they spend inside the city. We're trying to change that right now by attracting an auto dealership. Kent, the mayor, and the city council have aggressively tried to change the laws that allow this city to have a dealership in its, located in the city. Previously to 2 years ago, and this was the insight that Mayor Rolfe had when he was serving as the mayor, there was an exclusion if you were within 10 miles of an existing dealership. That council and that mayor challenged the legislature and reduced it by half to 5 miles. Presently, there are talks in discussion
with a very good dealership to try to see if they would arrive here in the city. That type of dealership, if we could land here in the city, could generate as much as $1 million a year. We are asking, after all, for $2.4 million. So if we had a car dealership, we cut that amount almost in half. The next item I'm going to ask and tell you to as a favor to me, you're going to say, why would I want to do that? I'm going to ask you to call our representatives and our senators, Senator Niederhauser, Senator Harper, Kim Coleman, and tell them, I will never shop at that liquor store, but I want it. We want it in the city. A liquor store will generate anywhere from $100,000 plus per month. I know a lot of people don't want to shop at a liquor store, but somebody does shop at liquor stores. A lot of people, they go to West Valley, they go to other cities, they don't shop in our city. So it may sound like a strange request, but if we get that, that's another $1.2 million that could help offset the cost of the property increase that we're looking at today. If you look across the valley, there are, I believe, 16 proposed tax increases through different municipalities throughout the valley taking place this month. In Salt Lake City, they are in fact looking at a tax increase on their property. Their property increase is going to be $19.04. The reason it is so low, even though it is a substantial increase as far as a percentage, is because they have car dealerships, they have retail sources that are bringing money in. We are doing what we can to address and help the citizens in this city by both encouraging people to shop at Jordan Landing, where currently Kim Wells from our press information office was working with Kent Anderson to attract people to come to that location, shop, go to the theater. We've just recently, this council was brave enough to pass an ordinance allowing a brewery at Jordan Landing. That brewery will have right across from the theater, hopefully food trucks that people will come in, eat, walk across the street, watch a theater, catch a movie, and go home. So we recognize that the economic engine of this city needs to improve, and there are real efforts to make that happen soon. I don't see Kent, and I suspect he's outside talking to Mr. Dennison. Mr. Dennison wanted an explanation as to whether or not we're economically seeing an increase in our profits. The answer to that is no. As I indicated, our citizens spend more money outside the city than they do inside the city, and we want to change that. Mr. Bloom asked the question whether or not it made sense to send our fire crew to California last year. The reality is California is on the hook to pay us for the time that those firefighters were in California. It was a favor to the California residents that we did it. At the time, we could do it, but there is a promise from the state of California to pay for that. The residents of this city will not be paying for that service. The citizens of California will pay for that service. The second question he had, I think the ambulance question about why 2 ambulances are not staffed, I'd like to have Chief Peterson to respond, because it does involve staffing and understanding why, when an ambulance leaves the city, why you can't staff the other 2 ambulances. So if I can ask Chief Peterson to come up here with me.
You might have to repeat that, David. I was discussing something over there.
So I wanted you to explain why when the ambulances leave, we can't use the 2 that remain in the city.
Okay, what we have, it's kind of an anomaly. It's a different kind of setup. It was a thing that started roughly around the year 2000. They entertained a new concept that is used basically for volunteer and cities with low call volumes. They did what's called a transport engine. It's basically an engine with an ambulance stretcher in it. It's specially designed. West Jordan bought 2 of them. There's one next door here, or I'm sorry, there's one at Station 53 in Jordan Landing, and there's one out west on 78 and 6400. Those 2, what we do is when we're short-staffed, we take the 2 people off the ambulance and put them on that transport engine. And we use it as a fire engine and also an ambulance. But what people don't understand is when you're 4-handed on an engine, you go on a medical call, and then you take that person, that medical call, up to the University of Utah or Primary Children's or somewhere out of this valley. Now you've taken a medical unit out of that city, out of 4 stations. You've taken a quarter of our units out of service, and also you've taken your fire protection out of service. By adding these personnel, we're asking for 1 person per platoon per those 2 stations. We'd be able to put 3 on that engine, and we're going to eliminate those. We're not going to purchase another one. They're outdated. They don't work for a city our size. But if we have 3 on that engine, we can put the extra person, 2 paramedics, on that ambulance. So if there's a medical call, that ambulance takes the person to University or IMC or Salt Lake Regional. You still have a fire engine there that can provide fire protection, 3-handed fire protection, and also a lot of times they're staffed with a paramedic, and they all know basic life support. They're all EMTs. So they can do basic life support until the next closest paramedic unit gets there. So you have medical and fire still in that area. Now, times that by 2, because we got 2 stations like that. And there's many times during the day, every day, we have both those units out of this city going to the hospital. That's what we want. It's not a want, it's a need. It's a need. We want to protect you. I don't know how else to say it. Okay.
Thanks, Chief. The next question I'd like to address was there a question about parks and our watering. I'm going to ask Dave Naylor to address that question.
Thank you, Mr. Berkey. I think when we talk about parks, it's a quality of life issue. We fit into a different category outside of police and fire. I think tonight I hear everybody talking about police and fire and the importance of police and fire and the safety of our community. But definitely parks have a play in our community. It produces quality of life, and then also enhances economic development if we provide an aesthetically pleasing city. So the comment that talked about, I'm assuming Veterans Memorial Park over here, and turning it into, business complexes or something that's going to generate the economic development. If we do that, we take a whole element out of our community that provides a quality of life for our citizens. There is a large percentage of our city that desires a quality of life as far as recreation, and trails are very high use amenity in our city. And then also in that comment there was mention about some of the special events, and my response to that is what is a community if you can't come together as a community and you can't have an annual celebration of the establishment of our community. So essentially my job is to create quality of life for our citizenry, and green space and open space and events that we put on for the city, generally at low cost or minimal cost or no cost. Those are quality of life issues, and if we eliminate those, we're going to affect a certain percentage of our community. So we do strive to irrigate our lawns and keep them green, but it's all based around quality of life for our citizens. So thank you.
Mr. Eldridge had some questions, and I'm going to step back and try to answer them, because I'm not sure I understood the question, but I want to follow up. What I'd like to indicate to those members here of the community is that West Jordan is no longer 48,000 residents. We're competing daily, weekly, with those larger residents, larger municipalities that surround us. If we're going to be competitive with places like West Valley, Salt Lake, Draper, and Sandy, who all have larger economic engines, we have to be more creative. We have to do more with less. We're trying to do that. One of the things you're going to hear me say right now, it's not going to be popular, but it's been done in West Valley and it's done annually. They look at that inflation rate of 2.7 and they suggest a truth in taxation every year. I think that's something that the reality has to be considered going forward. The next council will not exist in the form that it currently takes. In 2020, the city will see a significant change to a new form of government. When that occurs, I think you will see the opportunity to perhaps take the same approach that West Valley has implemented to have an increase or a consideration of an increase every year. That helps address the issues that inflation sort of creates. So with that said, I am going to step back to Mr. Eldridge and ask him to clarify his question and ask the council if there's any other questions that need clarification.
Councilmember Whitelock?
One member of the audience asked about police officers and how many this proposed increase would include. Could you answer that?
The police department is currently asking for 10 officers. My proposal was to recommend 5. The logic there was as we fulfilled those positions, I very realistically was going to, when we end the budget, the fiscal year, look to ask for another 5. I would be remiss if I wasn't honest about that in telling you. So I thank you for allowing me to clarify that. But those 5 positions can be, in fact, hopefully lateral positions that would help our felony teams as they get prepared to address some of the most heinous crimes that you have to face. As a police officer, 24 years, my first 8 were as a special prosecutor. And those are difficult, if not one of the most difficult cases to handle. So I don't know if I've answered your question completely, Council. All right, I'm going to just step back for a moment, and if you think about your questions, I'll be right back.
We've asked everybody to keep their comments to 3 minutes, and I think if you have a question, a member of staff right here, and maybe Mr. Linares would be able to answer that for you. If you, Joel, if you'd go.
You could go, yeah.
Mayor, while we're waiting for Mr. Bricky, I thought it might be interesting for the residents here just for me to state a few numbers to illustrate how rapidly the city is growing. Just this past year, we approved nearly 400 single-family residential building permits, including some of the multifamily apartment projects that are coming online. We're looking at an additional 1,300 to 1,400 people just in the past year that are calling West Jordan home now. And so that we look at the numbers and our projections, it looks like we're going to continue with that trend. And so I just wanted to state that West Jordan continues to grow at a very, very rapid pace. And we still have nearly 3,000 acres out west that could potentially be developed out as residential units. Of course, we're doing our best to preserve important intersections for commercial development, and it may also interest the residents that just tonight at another meeting downstairs, My staff, in working with the developers of Jordan Landing, approved some additional signage. And we're in close communication with the developers of Jordan Landing to revamp and refresh the entertainment complex and infuse more vibrancy and life into Jordan Landing as one of the primary economic tax generators in the city. So,
thank you. Mr. Bricky.
Thank you. We're going to get the answer from Mr. Aldridge. I'm sorry, the projects that we provide improvements include areas like the track station. We have agreements that we have to match sometimes. So I'm going to verify that and confirm exactly what it is we're spending the money in at that location. But generally, when it comes to tracks, it is something that's an agreement that we enter into. But I'll verify that. And there's usually a match that UTA matches, but I'll confirm that. Any other questions from the council?
Councilmember Lamb.
Thank you, Mayor. I think there was one question, I'm not sure which citizen asked about it, and I think I've looked into this as well. There was a substantial increase in the graffiti coverage. I'm not sure if you have an answer to that right now that you could give to us, or if you can look into that.
We did not. Thank you. Brock Hudson is present here tonight. He has been working with his staff to make presentation very soon that will address actually an increase in substantially those areas that we think the council would consider. Now, the report that was put together by Zions Bank asked for amounts that I was not comfortable. We're talking sometimes in excess of 32 times the amount that was previously collected. I think that excessive amount is something that's going to be hard for a business to deal with. So when we were looking at the analysis, we were looking at trying to address increases that were reasonable, but you, of course, as a council, will have final say on that. If I could ask Mr. Hudson to just step forward and maybe he can address that as well.
We have spent the last month and a half putting together a study that is relative to the study that was commissioned by the city as well as surrounding cities, and to put us in a level playing field with other cities when it comes to the business licensing. We are looking at disproportionate costs for business that do require police and fire levels that are above the base level that the study recommends. So you should have that coming forward, hopefully at not this council meeting next week, but the week following, the one after that. I believe, Councilmember Lamb, I believe you had mentioned graffiti as well. Was that something?
There was a line item for graffiti that was substantially higher than previous years, and I'm not sure if you have the numbers to talk about that right now, or if you can get that back to us. Or
I don't have those numbers. I can work with Chief Davis to get those numbers for you, though.
Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. I actually noticed that same line item and actually texted David Bricky about that. What I was told was that there were personnel moved under the graffiti department line item. The personnel budget went from 55-something thousand to 300-something thousand, or close to 300. Yeah, that was a big red flag for me too. So I noticed that. He said that there were people moved out of street repair and a couple other places that were put into that line item for that budget. So that may be an explanation.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, but it sounds like that maybe the graffiti has increased, and so we need to provide more service. Does that sound right, Chief Davis, or whoever can answer that?
The graffiti removal actually doesn't fall under our budget. That falls under Public Works. So I think he's got a response for that.
All right. Brian?
Councilmember Jacob is correct. We did consolidate a bunch of positions that were in different departments into the graffiti line to get off of the baseline budgeting that we were. It's easier to track this way. So we just moved them into Ender Graffiti, which that's their task, that's their job. As far as the increase, I'm gonna have to find out on that, why there was an increase. I don't have that information with me.
Anything else before we turn it over to discussion with the council? Sounds like we have no more questions, so we'll open the discussion to council for their discussion and eventually a motions. Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. Before we get into the tax rate discussion, which is a discussion we will actually, I'm sure we will spend a lot of time on, I want to make one change to the tentative budget that's been approved. And I've mentioned this already to the city manager and some things, and a couple of you. But we all agree that the crossing guards, I think we all agreed that the crossing guards was the top priority on the green sheet list. The funding the crossing guard issue, $213,000 was priority number one. At least that's how it came out on average for everybody who filled out that form. With that said, I'd like to take $200,000 that's already in the budget and put it in that crossing guard line item. And where I would like to do that from is from the snow removal budget. I don't want to change snow removal policy. I want that to be absolutely clear. But for the 3 out of the past 5 years, we have not spent nearly what we have budgeted for snow removal. We have this year proposed, or in the tentative approved budget, $300,000. Last year we spent $123,000. Year before we had on a $297,000 budget. And the year before that we spent $146,000. So we're spending about half, or a little less. We had a couple years ago a $600,000 budget, and we spent $300,000. That was the year we outfitted the trucks, the smaller trucks with the blades. Had some shuffling in Public Works to make that better, and we have the best snow removal in the valley. As somebody who drives a lot, I've seen it firsthand, you know, in a storm. So I don't want to change snow removal policy. If we have a really snowy year, I would like to take money out of contingency or out of the general fund reserves to pay for it if we have a snowy year. But I don't want to budget for a really snowy year if we're not going to have one. They call that a rainy day fund for a reason, right? It's Utah. Our rain is white and sticks. So I would like to do that. I don't know if we should have a motion to make that change.
Let me ask our attorneys about that.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. If I can comment on that. The process for changing an already adopted budget is to do a budget opening, and there's a specific notice requirement for that. You certainly can do that, but we need to notice it as that in the public notice. And tonight, this was noticed as a truth and taxation hearing only.
Right.
But that's certainly acceptable to do.
So,
but not tonight.
So with that direction, I would like to direct staff, if there's no objection, to put that on an agenda coming forward. And that way we can, if there's enough in favor, and I'd like to have the discussion because it is pertaining to the truth and taxation. Because if we can cover this out of the existing budget, we don't need to raise taxes to cover this. This item, not every item, this item. So I think we need to have a discussion, a kind of a head nod poll or something, I don't know what, but to know if we need to cover this in tax increases or if people are amenable to covering this out of the existing budget.
Councilmember
I'm not sure how to proceed as far as
I think we might have some comments here, so let's see. Councilmember Burton.
I actually clicked my button before he brought this up. However, since he brought this up, I will address that, and then if it's okay, I'll address my original topic, or do you want me to come back to it after?
Well, go ahead. You have the floor.
I'll take the floor. Thank you. So, Councilman Jacob, I like where you're thinking, move the money from the areas where we have some extra and put it with the areas that are at high demand and high need. So I would be in favor of making that change as well. So if we can't do it tonight, on another night when we can have more discussion on there, I think that would be most appropriate. The item I wanted to say is I kind of feel like Tevye here. I agree with everybody. I think we do need to cover these essential services from our police and our fire and our crossing guards and some other areas. And it's very critical that we take care and fund those things because it'll hurt our city if we don't. And then on the other hand, I also agree with those who don't want to raise taxes to accomplish those things. So I would like to propose that we would support those other areas and provide them the funds they need by pulling it from some other areas. And I say, what other areas can we pull from? Well, I think Councilman Jacob just did a fine example of one area we can pull from. And I think there are some others that we could as well. I think we need to look deeper into the budget and find some other areas. Now, I'm not saying that those other areas are overfunded. What I'm saying is we should be getting that money, as several of you have indicated, from our Economic Development Department. Some have mentioned because of the increase in our homes, we should be collecting more money. Well, we are. However, residential, the increase of money we get when we have additional residential doesn't meet the cost it provides for the service to do that. So increase in residential doesn't give us a positive cash flow from taxes, from property taxes. It gives us a negative because the servicing costs more than the additional funds we get. So in order to survive as a city, we have to have economic development. We have a fantastic economic development director, but he can't do it on his own. We have lots of good staff who are doing that. They can't do that on their own. It's going to take all of us working together as a city to make this happen. All of us shopping locally here in West Jordan, all of us encouraging businesses to come here and do that. We can't force business to come here to West Jordan. We can invite them and encourage them, but they get to make their own decision. They're private businesses. They make their private decisions. So I would like us to take some more looks and push the pressure on some of our department heads to see what areas we can cut for another year while we work extremely more difficult and strongly on our economic development. I think a tax increase would also make it more difficult for economic development because businesses pay the bulk of property tax. Residents get a 45% discount. Businesses pay the bulk of property tax. That's my words.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a lot of thoughts. I'll try and be brief. One of the things that I ran on was a better West Jordan. And one of the quotes that I used is not a quote I created, but it's insanity is doing, or what's the definition? Insanity's definition is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And my time in the city, and even when I was a neighbor to West Jordan City, the city maintained doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And I think we've heard tonight, with economic development, most of our residents shop outside the city. That hasn't changed. I did do some checking, and in May of 2002, the previous city council to us of the city passed an ordinance, Resolution 02-15, that required that fire calls, 90% of all fire calls have a 4-minute response time. We violate that now because we're now 6 minutes. That passed on a 7-0 vote. Our crossing guards, we do not right now have crossing guards to man the crosswalks for school starting just next week. So what we have to do, it's federal law, is we will pull police officers off the street and they will cross the kids during that period of time. We already heard mentioned that our police department has 60+ minute response times for certain calls. I did receive a call from a dispatcher from VEC who confirmed that we do have the highest call volume of any of the cities. And I've looked at the budget. Money is what I deal with on a daily basis, and we don't have excess in the city budget to do what Councilmember Jacob and Councilmember Burton are proposing. And so I would not be supportive of opening the budget for that purpose. We have to go a different direction than what we've done for 25 years. We've received a report on May 23rd from Judge Coons that showed that crime in the city is increasing, and it's the more severe crimes. We have higher domestic violence. We have shootings now. There's been at least 4 or 5 shootings since school got out, I think. 4 or 5 shootings that have occurred in our city. One very prominent that was on 78 South, a domestic violence issue, which we've heard in the news recently. We have to address these, or we continue to do insanity of doing the same thing over and over again. The residents I've talked to at Night Out Against Crime and a neighborhood meeting that I attended just Sunday, or a neighborhood party, I should say, that I attended Sunday, and I talked to a number of residents, they want to see change. They want to see the city be different. They want the city to do different. They want economic development. And to me, this tax increase is a foundation to take care of the important necessary things so that we can work on economic development and we can work on our fees, many of which one of the residents brought up, our fees. There's a lot that are dated pre-2006. They're 12 years old. There's a good number that haven't been updated since 2008, 2009, 10 and 9 years old. And that's something that we also have to address that primarily impacts developers, which gets passed on to home buyers, and it affects business. I do not believe, after 15 years as a Chamber of Commerce president, that the tax rate or business license fees impede a business ability to locate in West Jordan. West Valley City is more than double our business license fees, and they have twice the number of licensed businesses that we have. West Valley has higher taxes than we have, and yet they have twice as many licensed businesses. Many corporations house there, many small businesses are housed there. I think we're kidding ourselves if we think that low taxes is what drives business to come here. So I would not be in support of opening the budget to take money from our snow fund. We also have, when I was appointed to the council in November 2016, we had 811 lane miles. And as of last week, we have 883 lane miles. That's an increase of 72 lane miles. We have not increased any trucks. We're now asking our public works to plow 72 more lanes, or 72 more miles of road with the same 11 trucks, and it now takes them 24, 25 hours to plow 811. So it takes more than a day to plow all our streets, and we just added 72 miles, and this budget doesn't address any of those things. So I do not know, after me looking through the budget, I do not know where there's a lot of excess. There might be pennies and nickels in the couch cushions, but I don't see $400,000. I don't see $250,000 sitting. That's fine, and this will be the snowstorm that we have to cover because it snows every week. We have to be prepared. We have to think not just 2018, 2019, 2020, where are we headed? And to me, this is a foundation to get us on a new trajectory that the residents can be proud of, the residents can feel safe, the residents can feel good shopping in our city because we have an economic development director that the next step is to bring economic development into the city, which will take a couple years, and we move forward. And so those are my comments. Thank you for the time, Mayor.
Councilmember Whitelock.
Thank you. Because oftentimes my emotions get in the way of my thought process, I often write down my thoughts, which I've done. So we as a city need to add to our commercial base to help create a city where the residential tax burden is low. As I am sure you understand, businesses pay 100% and residential homes pay 55% of property value. Also, our property tax is calculated by the county to generate a specified dollar amount to the city. As our home value goes up, our tax rate goes down because we are collecting a specific dollar amount, not a percentage of home or property value. No measure is built in for inflation, like the rise in gas prices or employee compensation. While it would be nice if the new residences going in would pay for services, the reality is a residential property taxed at 55% of its value does not generate the funds necessary to provide the city's services at an equal rate of growth. In order to attract new businesses, we need to have a city that businesses see the value of locating in. Some of the things they look for are rooftops, and in this area, I think we'd agree we're doing great. Our growth is tremendous. Another important aspect they consider is quality of life. Our city has a need to attract and retain quality fire and police at a ratio that keeps our residents and businesses safe. While we do have some police positions funded yet not filled, if we don't fund them, we can't fill them. Currently, we are below the ratio recommended by many sources for our population. As we hear on the news and see perhaps even in our own families, mental health issues continue to increase in our community. The times I have spent with the police have shown me what this looks like for our police and fire. As I have spent time both going on calls and reviewing the call screen, we have many mental health calls. My nursing background and work experience helps me understand how time-intensive these calls can be and also how volatile they can be. Have you ever seen a plate glass window broken by a grandma or a fellow employee body slammed? I have while working with mentally ill patients. So while we may not have numerous fires, we do have numerous medical calls that both our fire and police respond to. Another observation from my time spent with police is that it is not uncommon for a lieutenant or patrol officers to have to triage calls. I don't know about you, but if I'm taking the time to call the police, I want an officer to respond and to respond quickly, because to me, it's an emergency or I wouldn't be calling them. Once the offender has been apprehended, I want them to be brought before a jury of their peers to determine their guilt or innocence, not to have it decided by a deal between lawyers because we didn't have enough prosecutors to take it to court. So again, we are triaging. I also think it's vitally important that we have crossing guards to cross our children. While we can fill in with police officers, it's just not the same. That crossing guard builds a relationship with those children, and those children begin to trust and rely on another adult in their lives. And in our society, that is really important. I am a very frugal person by nature and understand that what is being proposed means less money in taxpayers' pockets, including mine. I've owned a home and lived in West Jordan for over 30 years and will continue to live in West Jordan for about another 40, give or take. So I will be paying this tax with everybody else based on what this council decides. Now some background. In 2010-2011, Mayor Johnson was our mayor, and while she was in office, she did staff cuts. Several positions were eliminated. And after Mayor Johnson, other councils chose to cut snowplow service, park maintenance, and other upkeep on city properties to balance the budget. While that might be a good short-term solution, it is not a long-term way to run a city. For the last year or two, properties have been sold and reserve funds have been used to balance the budget. For in Utah, we're required to have balanced budgets, which I appreciate and I'm grateful. However, I do not feel that looking at this budget in depth that we have the ongoing revenue to run our city at the level most of our residents desire and is needed to attract businesses to our city. Now, do I think that we can do better in some areas with taxpayers' dollars? Yes, I do. Hence, I carefully read everything that comes into our packets for our council meetings, and these gentlemen can attest, I call often and say, what is this? Why are we doing this? Because I feel that's my job, is to look out for our money, because it's not my money, it's your, well, some of it is, but just a little bit, because I'm a taxpayer. It's your money. Every employee needs to continue to remember that the money we operate on is tax dollars and needs to be used only for the highest and best purposes, which is why many requests are going unfunded. Mr. Brickey mentioned that we started much higher. While many of them would be nice and perhaps make someone's job easier, they are not to the level that a tax increase should be funded. It is my hope that we can continue to build a community where people and businesses want to locate. And for me, that means we need to invest and not just play a coconut shell game with our current budget, because I agree with Councilman Anderson. I have looked at the budget also, and I just don't see hundreds of thousands of dollars that are required to fund police and fire and crossing that are essential services in the current budget. Thank you.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. A lot of thoughts running through my mind. I don't have anything eloquently positioned to read, so I'm just going to try and give some transparency and let you see what's running through my mind. I really don't like being in this position. It's not a fun position to be in. It's difficult to feel like you're here to represent the neighborhood, to represent your neighbors, people you see regularly when you go to the grocery store, when you drop your kids off at school, when you go to church on the weekend. And this is something that's very divisive, and it's very emotional for many folks. As we sat here this evening, I listened to the folks who were for and who were against. It sounded like, if I counted everything right, we had about 20 people who came up and shared their thoughts. 9 of them were in support. 9 of them were in opposition. 2 of them, I couldn't really decide, so I put a question mark with them because they were the questions of what's the per capita cost and what are we doing for economic development. So overall, the 9 and the 9, it seems pretty fairly split, but it's still an incredibly emotional issue. From a personal perspective, I take my role very seriously. I pride myself in trying to do my best to understand the issues and vote in the way that would be not necessarily the most popular, but the most beneficial for the majority of the residents. If I look at this from a little bit more selfish perspective, I think about this as my role as a city council member. I was on the council when we raised the property tax in 2012 for the first time since the 1980s. I really don't want to be on the council to see the second increase. Granted, it's only been done at this point once in over 30 years. I don't really want to be on both councils to raise the property taxes. But it's not about me, it's about what we need to do. We've heard a number of times, well, so many other entities are raising their property taxes. Can we just wait? We have. This is my 7th year, my 7th time going through this process. And as Councilmember Whitelock has suggested, there are a lot of things that we did to try and stave off what maybe we shouldn't have. Mr. Bricky talked about the idea of having a property tax increase every few years. Property tax has a very interesting structure. Most taxes, they set a flat percentage and you gather that percentage. As values go up, you gather more. The state legislature intentionally did not set up property tax that way. They set it up so that when they set it up, you basically set an amount and you collect the amount and then the percentage changes. So if we look at what the rates were from 2012, we had about a 0.26% property tax rate for the city of West Jordan. It dropped 4% in 2013 and was 0.25. Then it dropped to 0.26, which was an 8% decrease. It dropped to 0.22, which was a 5% decrease. It dropped to 0.21, which is another 5% decrease. In 2017, it dropped again to a 0.19% property tax rate, which was an 8% decrease. We didn't have anybody coming out in those years getting frustrated with us as it went down. But they got frustrated with us over other things. We'd have people, I want to say it was 2014, 2015, we had a number of public hall meetings about parks. I know there were a couple that were on the dais. I'm not sure, I don't think you were necessarily in the seats on the dais, but attending those town hall meetings, people were getting frustrated saying, we would happily pay a parks fee of $8 to $10 per month in order to have better parks. It never came to fruition, but there was a lot of outcry to see an increase for those parks. We've heard from folks who are frustrated about snow removal. We've heard they wanted to see things done better. We've increased the number of small plows. We've made an effort to get to residential streets. We've done it within the budget that we had. And when I say within the budget that we had, seeing that percentage decline, seeing the revenues fail to significantly increase, we found other ways to cut. A number of years ago, the fleet fund was absolutely decimated. We had, I think it was something like $7 or $8 million in funds to replace vehicles that had dwindled around to about, I want to say 15 to 20% of what that total used to be. So we did get creative, and we'd been kicking the can down the road, and then 2012 was kind of a reckoning to try and set things right. Something else that we did is we started making investments, significant investments in economic development. We, up until that point, did not have an economic development director, so we hired one. We also did not have lobbyists advocating for the city, so we hired some lobbyists as well. We made large 6-figure investments in economic development, anticipating that that would help improve things, and honestly, it has significantly. We would have been at this juncture much sooner had we not. I know some of you have noticed that there'll be certain topics I seem to get a little bit touchy about. When we talk about failures of the prior council or where we are currently failing today, when people kind of point at the former council and say those guys had no idea what they were doing. Well, I was on that former council, and we did a lot. We tried to do the best that we could to avoid the property tax increases and live within the funds that we had, and at the same time try and grow those funds. We did a lot of work in order to be able to get the state law changed. We were legally prohibited from having a car dealership within West Jordan boundaries for quite some time. We worked on economic development. I'm sure many have heard the name Project Discus, and there was a lot of controversy around that one, but there was also a lot of misinformation. I can't quote Councilmember Jacob directly from memory, but his comment in one forum was, had that happened, we wouldn't be here today. We're trying to do what we can to see that additional revenue come in. We're working with Jordan Landing as they're trying to improve and bring in additional businesses, but part of that is there's a bit of a lull. They're letting some of their leases expire so they can get in there and turn the properties over and make it better. I've scribbled down a bunch of ideas. I want to make sure I hit all of them, so let me quickly kind of cut through some of these. There are some things that I will admit that there are things that we could do better. There are more places we could cut. And the reality is there will always be places that we cut. The question becomes, at what point does it materially help us to continue to cut? If you think of it like a family budget, there are always things that you have that are nice to have that may not be 100% necessary depending on your personal preferences. You may decide, I mean, a simple thing, but when the budgets are tight, maybe I don't go for the name brand deodorant, I go for the off-brand deodorant. If money's really tight, well, is deodorant even a real necessity? You can continue to cut, but at some point things start to stink. The quality of life just isn't there. I totally agree with the comment that was made about the parks, the soccer complex. We sink about last numbers I was given, we sink about $500,000 a year into those parks, and they bring in about $70,000 a year in tournament fees. But it's one of those quality of life issues. It's not 100% necessary, but people want to have that quality of life. We could cut out all of those things that bring in quality of life and just cover the bare essentials, but I worry how many people actually want that. I don't think that most do. If we were to get rid of our parks, if we were to get rid of our sidewalks, if we were to get rid of code enforcement, is certainly not necessary, but that's one of the things we get the most complaints about. People want to see additional folks with code enforcement. That's not really included in our budget this time. Talking about economic development again, some of the things that we've been working for, we would love to see that liquor store. We've been working for that, trying to propose locations for that. That's something that Utah's DABC, they're the ones who make the decision where that goes. And we've tried to work with them. We've offered them, I think it was 3 or 4 locations we recommended, and they ended up putting it right on our border. They've done that a couple times. But we continue to work with them. Same thing with Discus. A lot of misinformation was put out there, which hurt us. We're seeing online revenues, online purchases increase, and we're not seeing the sales tax collection growth that we would have otherwise expected with the population growth. Historically, you would have expected that as the population grows, so will your sales tax revenue. Well, that growth curve has significantly changed. We have seen substantial growth, though, in other areas like infrastructure. We now have Mountain View Corridor running north and south that's bringing a substantial amount of traffic that's now given us the opportunity to have a Smith's and potentially some other big box retailers out there, which has been very helpful, but it's also caused an increase in number of calls for police and fire. Speaking of police and fire, some of those places where we could potentially cut, going back to the fleet fund, we could reevaluate how we're funding fleet. A number of years ago, we made a conscious decision that we would be on a 3-year cycle for police vehicles. We, again, when we decimated the fleet fund, we severely crippled ourselves and it was causing problems. We were saving money on paper for the fleet fund by not funding it fully, but we were increasing the number of repairs substantially. There was a ride-along that I got to go on with one of our officers, I don't remember who it was, but the intersection of 70 South and 2700 West. We were heading westbound, we roll up on the light and we see a West Valley officer, one of their Crown Vics, heading northbound on 27, just kind of off on the right side of the road. We got out to see if they needed help or assistance of some sort. We weren't sure why they were there with the lights flashing and nobody in front of them. Their car died. I don't want to find ourselves in positions where we're letting equipment age beyond its useful life and it's putting our people at risk or the inability to respond. And that's why we're at with our fire department. One of the first questions I asked, nine firefighters, that's a lot. Why are we not trying to phase this in? Why did we not get asked for this last year? The blunt answer was our former city manager decided not to present that request to the city council. That request was there, but it was not presented. A little bit more digging. Why do they need 9 more officers? What has suddenly changed? What suddenly changed is the call volume. You look at our number of calls. The year 2015-2016, we had 1,059 calls. 16-17, that jumped by 21% to 1,280 calls. 17-18, that jumped to 2,062 calls for service, a 61% jump from the prior year. So from 15-16 to 17-18, we saw a 95% jump in calls for service from our fire department. There's a couple of reasons for that. I'm sure 911 transfers have a play in that, but we also have a UFA station that closed down. We were getting the benefit of having UFA cover our area without us having to pay for that, and now we're having to cover our own way. As was mentioned, our code says that we are shooting for a average 4-minute response time for 90% of calls. Right now we're closer to 6 minutes. As I'm sitting here thinking, what do I want to do? Do I want to support a property tax increase? Or do I want to support a change in code to loosen the target for response time? There's no way I'm going to put my name next to a proposal to say, let's respond slower. As I'm looking at what's been requested, we've got a couple different options that have been presented from staff, anywhere from 0 to 12, 15, 18, 20%. My feeling is, as much as I don't like it, I would support the 20% change. We have not asked staff to bargain with us. We've not asked them to negotiate with us. We didn't say, throw out a high number so we can come back and look like the heroes with something lower. We've asked us to tell them what they need, and they've documented it. They've said, depending on what you want to do, this is what it's going to cost. I'm supportive of the things that were shown up there. Police and fire, absolutely. The prosecutor, absolutely. When we look at some of the other things on there, like the $150,000 for the saline system so that we can help keep the roads clean, yeah, I would be supportive of that. When we look at the dollar amount of the impact, the difference between 18% and 20% to the average resident it's not material, but the impact that it has on the quality of life is tangible. So I would be supportive of that 20% that they said that they need to do the job that has been asked. I think we're going to go year to year, and I don't anticipate, I know Mr. Brickey suggested we should probably have a truth in taxation on a regular basis, even annually. I don't imagine that happening. Nobody wants to have their name next to a property tax increase. I think that this is probably the reason why you don't see a lot of folks who have served at the city level move on to serve with either county or the state. It's very difficult to go to the public and say, I'd like to represent you, and you know full well in the past I've supported a property tax increase with the city. Well, the city's structured differently. It takes a fair amount of education to help them understand that. But the way the state of Utah has architected the system is the reason that we're here tonight. It's appropriate and it's right that we be here to be held accountable for the residents when the hard questions are asked. And at the end of the day, if that question is, will I support raising the property taxes so that we can fund the things that the residents have been asking for, or will I support opposing a property tax increase that most people don't want, I have to side with what's right for the family, what's right for the neighborhood. I think the appropriate thing to do is support the property tax increase at the 20% that has been requested by staff, and continue to find ways to find additional efficiencies. Look at how we can try to avoid it as long as possible, hopefully another 6 to 8 years again in the future. I think we've done very, very well avoiding it previously, but those are the thoughts running through my mind. Thank you for the floor.
Councilmember Lamb.
Thank you, Mayor. One thing about following Councilmember McConaughey is he already took up almost half the stuff I wanted to say, but I wanted to thank you for your service. You are the senior member on our council, and the reason I bring that up is because in the time that I started really attending and paying attention to what the council does, everyone has changed but Chris in that time. And so it kind of shows you that over time the council does change. The decisions we make today will be different in 4 years or 8 years from now because different people will be on the staff. I see another council member in the gallery today that used to be on the council as well, and I'm glad he's here tonight. But the one thing I want to say is I love living in West Jordan. I have lived in my home right now for 17 years. I lived previously with my parents in another area of West Jordan. And the reason I love it here is, number one, location. I like the location in the valley. Number two is the quality of life. I feel like I have a great quality of life in this city. I'm sure I could find it in other cities as well, but it's great here, so why move? And then the third thing is I feel safe. I do not feel scared or worried in my neighborhood at night. And one of those reasons is because we do have good police protection in this city. We have a great police department, but I also know that they cannot keep up with the volume of calls that we are having lately. And for those of you who don't know me, last year I was not on the council. I was out there listening to the council, although there was no truth and taxation last year. And I can say 100% I believe that none of us want to be up here today to do this today, to have this truth and taxation and ask for what I think is a need. I don't think these are wants. My thoughts real quickly, I don't want to go into too much detail, but I do believe that we need help with our police department and with those 5 officers. In talking with those that I know, we need more than 5. We need the 10. We actually probably need more than 10. And I wish there was a way that we could fund 20 more, but I know that we can't right now. But at this time, I do feel that those 5 new officers can help us this year. And as our city grows and as our economic development grows, we can look to find ways to fund new officers as well. As far as fire goes, I've heard people say before, well, 9 new firefighters aren't going to help me. I don't have any issues with fires, but there's going to be that one time where you might need them. They'll come to your neighborhood or to your neighbor's neighborhood, and you are going to need them, and I'm going to need them as a citizen of West Jordan. And so I see no problem in asking our citizens to help fund new firefighters and help us out in the department. If we don't do it this year, we're going to have to do it next year or the next year. Somewhere we're going to have to find the money to fund these, and hopefully we won't have to be back here next year, like Chris said, year after year asking for a raise in taxes. Just to kind of some thoughts, as the Councilmember Jacob was talking about snow removal budget being too high because we didn't use it all, and it is there for rainy day fund. We haven't had a lot of snow lately in the past few years. We haven't had to use all that budget. So instead of moving that budget from snow removal to the crossing guards, we can use that budget to pay for the brine system that they've asked for instead. And that would take us, lower than that 20%, and even to 18%. I'm all for looking for ways to cut. Like I said, last year I sat on the other side and I looked for ways to cut, and it was difficult. There were some areas that were cut, but really we are short on services in most of the areas in the city, and we need to continue to grow those areas so that we can make sure that we have the services we need for all of our wants in our lives here in West Jordan. So as you listen to us talk tonight, we all have our thoughts. Realize we're all citizens of the city as well, and we want to make sure that we're supporting you, and we ask for your support from us as well in the decision that's made tonight so that we can make sure we're doing what's best for West Jordan. Thank you.
Councilmember Whitelock.
Thank you. Councilmember Lamb brought up something that I agree with. And when anyone looks at this list, they're going to say, well, I like that, I don't like this, I like this, I don't like that. But the reality in our form of government is we're not actually voting on these exact items. We're voting on a percentage to increase to fund these items. And so there is wiggle room in these, on this list, actually. And so there are things that I'm not comfortable with, and there's an amount that I am comfortable with. So, but before I make a motion, I want to make sure that Councilmember McConaughey, I appreciate all that he's done in all his service, and I think sometimes things that I might say come across wrong. I get it. I've served on other boards, and while you're in these seats, you make tough decisions. And when you're in those seats, you have a different opinion. And that's how our form of government works, because when you're in this seat, you're thinking with the information that these guys give you, and these guys give you, and these gentlemen share with you, and the citizens share with you. Usually when you're sitting in the gallery, you're thinking of the information that you receive, which is more limited than what we get. So it's different. But I do appreciate his service in the past, and I always appreciate him sharing his thoughts. With that, I'm going to make a motion for an 18% increase. And the reason I'm going to make a motion for an 18% versus the 20 is because from what I've heard, most people are in favor of crossing guards, police, and fire. And I've heard other council members say, we think there might be some money in the budget where there's some wiggle room. So I think there might be some money in the budget for wiggle room for some of these other items, but I don't think there's enough to fund all of this. So, Mayor, my motion is that we increase taxes by 18%.
Councilmember Bland.
I'll second for discussion.
We have a motion and a second, so discussion to the motion. Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. I wasn't done. I was just asking if you wanted to move money out of snow removal for crossing guards. And wow, that took a turn. I'm guessing no, so okay. My question for staff, either for finance, for public works, or for the city manager, what happens to that $250,000 we didn't spend on snow removal last year? Where is that money now?
I can answer that. It usually, well, it depends on the winter. If we have a slower winter.
I just mean last year we had $300,000.
Dave's got it here.
Yeah, at the end of every fiscal year, if you will, revenues, and then from those you subtract your expenses, and whether that's positive or negative, it goes down to fund balance. So either if you've overspent your revenues, then you have a lowering of your fund balance in the general fund, or the reverse, you have an increase in your fund balance in the general fund.
Okay, thank you for that. Just for clarification, the last 2 years in snow removal, and I closed that tab because I read the tea leaves. Oh, no, I didn't. Here it is. Last 2 years, we have had 200,000 plus each year from snow removal then go into that general fund balance. So that general fund balance is $400,000 higher than it would have been had we had the snowiest winter of all time, or it's snowy enough to use up our budget, whatever that might be. I'm going to be opposed to 18% with the motion on the table, just to put that out there. I'm not saying we don't need anything, but I'm saying that none of this is an emergency. None of this needs to be done today to counteract a, debt ratio for a bond or something like that. That's another topic for discussion, another day. I'm saying even we approve this, we do have to do it today. We have to make a vote today. It's county, it's state law, whatever. We do have to vote for it today. Vote on it today. We don't have to vote for it today. But we can authorize, if we authorize 20 police officers, for example, if we had the funds to, if that was what was on the table, we wouldn't be able to hire 20 police officers in the next fiscal year. I'm hesitant to say we can hire 5. We've had a hard time hiring police officers. I'm not saying we don't need them. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that reality, the money that we're gonna spend on hiring police officers is gonna be different than what we're budgeting for. I'm not sure about firefighters because we haven't done that. So it may take a long time to hire firefighters, it may not. I'm not sure about that one. We could staff one ambulance, see how long it takes, and staff the other one next year. Again, nobody's house is burning down today. It might happen, and people's houses do burn down, that's not what I mean. I mean, nobody's house is burning down because the fireman doesn't come. Fireman comes. We help other cities in their departments, they help us in our departments when we have, you know, somebody driving an ambulance up to University of Utah. We have West Valley and South Jordan on alert or whatever to help us out if we need it. All of that's in place is what I'm saying. But the bottom line for me is that we have to look at the current budget to find efficiencies. We should do that all the time. And I'm not saying we haven't. I'm just saying I found $250,000 that's going into the fund balance the last couple of years in a row. Why don't we use some of that? Not from the fund balance, from the budget, from going forward. Let's avoid putting $200,000 more into the fund balance while we're raising taxes. So yeah, again, I'm gonna be a no at 18%. Don't have the exact number in front of me that I'd be in favor of, but if we keep going, I'll let you know.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. The first thought is to why not take from the fund balances in the current year budget. The surplus in the current budget is because we don't know what that surplus really is, and it's kind of a rough estimate. We don't know where tax revenues are going to be. We know there's changes to sales tax collection, online revenues. We might or we may not see anything from that based on what we heard last week. Some of the numbers in the past have not come in where we've expected them to be. I know in the past we have had certain projections where we expected, here's another fun one I didn't hit on earlier. We'd expected revenues from the fire department to come in higher, but they came in lower. And some of the reasons for coming in lower were because staffing, we weren't able to get to all the calls, but there were also changes in procedures. Fire department only sends out a bill if somebody's if they transport somebody to the hospital. Procedures have changed, and they found that there's a better success rate if they stay and perform CPR on scene. You would hate for something tragic to happen, and then on top of the family tragedy, leave that person with an unnecessary bill for transport to the hospital. We've improved our technology, we can do better work on site, but I believe we've seen a decrease in some of our revenue because of that. Not all of the revenues that are forecasted come to fruition, so I'm not, last year we had protracted, really, really extended conversations about what did we think the revenues are actually going to be. I spent probably half hour, 45 minutes with Councilmember Newton aggravating everybody who was in attendance as we went through. You're laughing because it's true. But we went through with a fine-tooth comb and tried to refine down those revenue estimations. So I'm not ready to concede that we have an extra $250,000 just sitting there. That's why I would prefer not to make that move. The other thing I want to talk about with the 5 additional police officers is just clarification. The request was never for 5 additional officers. Back in 2012, when we had our new police chief come in, the request was for over 30 officers. We've had about 17. We're about halfway there. The request for additional police officers will not end. We are seeing some significant issues in the market with retention. And frankly, some of that's the fault of the state legislature. They changed the program. I think it was effective, July 1st, 2012, where now it takes, or maybe 2011, but where now it takes additional years to reach that retirement, and the contributions to the retirement account just aren't there. You mix that with the kind of the national disposition towards public safety in general, and it's just difficult. I want to make sure, though, that as you go through and you read articles, if you just Google Salt Lake Valley Police hiring, you'll see Sandy City earlier this year throwing $1 million at it, Salt Lake City throwing multiple millions of dollars, a lot of creative strategies to try and obtain public safety personnel. I don't want us to fail because we don't have funds available. With police, or excuse me, with fire, we also are going to have some economies of scale. If we're sending 9 people through Fire Academy at the same time doing training for 9 people, we'll be able to get a lot further than if we had tried to spread those out. And I think there's some cost savings from doing it at once instead of broken out. Bringing us back to the request at hand for the 18%. 18% is still somewhat substantial, and something I failed to mention. A couple of the comments here that hit with me. We need to make sure that we have a strong circuit breaker program. That those folks who are most impacted by any change they're the folks who we need to watch out for the most, and we have to make sure that there's protections in place so that they're not injured by the change here. There's a lot that they benefit from, and there's a circuit breaker program in place. But I think it would be beneficial for the council to receive a little bit of education from staff on maybe potential modifications. I don't know that it's been examined thoroughly in recent months, so that would be a recommendation. The other thought is, rather than starting with the 18%, I would prefer that we start at 20 and see if there's support for that, and then if not, try 18, and then move down. If there are 4 who would support the 20, I'd like to start there, but that's just me. I'm in opposition to the motion at 18%, but I feel obligated to vote for it, if that makes sense. I'm not going to be the person that speaks in favor of something and then votes against it, and then has the ability to publicly say, well, I didn't support that, and tries to play both sides of the fence. Even though I'm not in favor of 18%, I think I will end up voting for it, but I would prefer to see 20. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I'm going to jump in here since my light was on ahead of Councilmember Burton's. A couple of things I want to talk about real quickly is primarily the budget. As a city employee for 15 years, I put budgets together for this city for fleet, for parks, for facilities, for solid waste, for the cemeteries. And in working through those budgets, I never felt like I had any fluff, if you will, to be able to say, well, we can drop this or we can drop that. And in talking to other department heads in the city as this process was going on, I never felt like they did either. And going back to that time that Councilmember McConaughey mentioned, where layoffs took place, they looked at a way to save money in the city. Well, yeah, they laid off about 40 people in order to make this work several years ago. And when you do that, when you start laying off employees, you start reducing your services. And that's one of the things that we look, what does the city do? We provide services. That's what we do. And if we start reducing our people, then we start reducing our services. I asked today, too, about the snow removal issue. And I was told that when there's not a lot of snow removal going on, they can go out, the street crews can go out and do crack sealing. They will go out and take that time to still do crack sealing because, of course, in the wintertime, the cracks will open up. In the summertime, they close up again. So in the wintertime, it's nice. If there's no snow out there, they can go out and they can do crack sealing. So it's not like they're not doing anything while there's no snow to plow. I just want to make sure and help you understand that from my experience here in 15 years with the city and putting budgets together, I never felt like I had fluff that I could just take out without reducing some other action. And I have to say, too, that where the $150,000 is in the up to the in the 20%, I guess, within that range, that was part of what I was putting in my budget before. It never did make it through the budgeting process before. But my successor put it in again this year. And the reason he did that was because consistently, year after year, in the facilities department, things happen. We want to take this wall down and we want to put a door in over here and we're going to remodel this office over here. And those things were never budgeted for. So when I was in that department, I put money in for these unforeseen things that happened during the year. And they happened. The animal shelter had a huge thing where the air conditioning wasn't working. It happened. Even in this building, We had to replace the roof a few years back, $500,000 to do that. Things like that happen, and they don't get budgeted for, and then council has to come and say, well, how are we going to do that? The chiller in this building, another $500,000 project, had to be replaced. We had to go find the funding. Council at the time had to go find the funding for that. So things happen. They do. And it's not like there's a big, huge reserve there to take care of things when they do happen. Luckily, the state says you have to have no less than 5% of what you're, something like that. I can go up to 25% of your general fund balance. We don't carry that much money up to 25%. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe it's 12, 13%. So it's not a huge amount of money of the total general fund. So there's not, in my opinion, I couldn't go along with moving money out of snow removal either, because there's always that chance that we could have a huge snowstorm that could eat up. I've watched the salt out there get depleted in like 2 days. Our total salt storage gets depleted in 2 days because of storms that happen. I've watched our guys on Christmas Day, whole crews going out snow plowing because it snowed Christmas Day. They're not home with their families, they're out doing their job. We have some very dedicated folks that work in the city. It'd be difficult to see us reduce our services because of not wanting to take care of everything that happens in the city. So, and I'm like Councilmember McConaughey. I really probably would prefer the 20%, but I would vote for the 18. So with that, I'll go to Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not disputing that we have these needs. My question is, what's the best way to pay for those needs? Is it with a property tax? We buy a piece of property, then we pay tax on it year after year after year. You buy a microwave, you pay tax on it once. You buy a motorcycle, you pay tax on it once. You buy a bicycle, you pay tax on it once. You buy a property, you pay tax year after year. You make more money, you buy more things, you pay more taxes. You make less money, you buy less things, you pay less taxes. Your property, regardless of how much money you make, you continue to pay that tax year after year. Councilman McConaughey mentioned the circuit breaker, which is a fantastic program that the county offers. So if you are a retired person or on limited income and you haven't investigated that from the Salt Lake County, that is the Salt Lake County program. You can get that application online or go in person and do that application, and it's available right now, which they do every year when property taxes are being reevaluated. You need to do it now. The deadline on that ends in September or something. I don't know what it is, but do it quickly if you're involved in that. And then it's been mentioned that we're just doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same results. Well, the easy thing is to raise the taxes. In 2012, I was sitting where you are now, and they wanted to raise the taxes 17%. I was here to oppose it. They wanted to raise that as taxes because they said we needed it for police and fire, which I agreed, but I thought that getting the money that way wasn't appropriate. They raised the taxes. We're back in the same position again now. Does that mean in 5 more years we're going to be there again, wanting to raise it 17, 20% again? We need to find another way to fund it. We've got this great opportunity. Well, perhaps we do. The federal government just said that we can collect online sales tax now. The sad part is the state's going to be keeping that money. We're not going to get that in our city unless we go knock on the doors of our legislators and let them know that's our money that those online people are buying within the city of West Jordan, because we're losing it in our brick and mortar stores and it's going online. We should be getting that money back over here. We should make sure our legislators are aware of that and they change the law so that it can be tracked to what location we are when we buy those online sales, and that money comes to us instead of going to the state, into the general fund, and them deciding if we need that money or not. Those are the reasons that I will be opposing this, because we'll be in the same boat again. We need to find another way to fund this, and property tax is not the answer.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. I'm very sympathetic, and I didn't express that earlier. I recognize that this is an impact on our residents and our seniors and those that are retired, young families that have bought homes. I recognize all of those things. I also want to just thank Councilmember McConaughey. He's very seasoned, and I appreciate his background that he provides to the council as our senior member. And he relayed a lot of information and data points that I'm feeling up here. And I did calculate the tax for my home. And at a 20%, it's $74.32 a year, which is $6 a month, a little over $6 a month. And the difference between 20 and 18 for my house, I had my calculator here, is $7.43 a year is the difference between 20 and 18. And I do feel, much like the mayor and Councilmember McConaughey, that I think 20 is what the city needs. That's what our staff has recommended to us as what the needs are, to be able to provide the same level of service that we have historically provided to our residents, and not the decrease in service that our residents are experiencing right now. I would have preferred 20%, but I can probably be supportive of 18. I do believe, though, that until the legislature changes how they do property tax, there is no provision for inflation within the property tax collections. And so if the inflation rate is approximately 2 to 3%, by going to 18%, we've accelerated the time for the next truth in taxation by at least 1 year. So I agree with Councilmember Burton that we, the state of Utah, and its elected leaders need to maybe find a different way or a better way to fund. But as long as it is what it is, inflationary pressures will always cause us to have to go through this process at some point in the future, and the 18% will accelerate it by a year. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks for indulging me with another minute here on the floor. I have a question for staff, and that is how, I can count, this will pass. How will that money be allocated? When will that money be allocated amongst the different, I can't move $250,000 from the snow removal budget into the police department for crossing guards without agendizing it and talking about it. How is this $2 million-ish gonna be allocated? How, do we need to come back and vote on where exactly that money's gonna go?
Since our recommendation was 20%, and if there is something less, I'm hearing a discussion of 18%, I can certainly remove the 2%, but if after the approval of the 18%, you want to identify specifically what it is that you're uncomfortable with, that's one way to do it. The other would be when we do item 4A, adjust the budget. That's the next item.
Just the top line number, though. It doesn't get into the
That's right.
weeds.
That number will have to change. So we could bring that back.
Can we?
We need to have that on the, we would have to advertise it Friday to have it on for the 22nd.
Somebody get out a calculator. We can do that tonight.
Okay, since we've advertised this for the truth in taxation, and from what I've heard so far, and we had the list of 19 items, so far there's been no change in that order of 19. So right now, if you pass the 18, we show you a line where 18 would take you to and what those items are. Those items, because you've had this public hearing and you're now deciding on that, and you have an agenda item coming, and you would set a budget for the general fund associated with that. Those items for that line that goes out there for the 18%, those that are above that line, that's where that budget would go in those dollar amounts.
So this sheet with the 19 items on it or whatever it is, this is binding then on this vote, unless we open up the budget and crack it back open?
From what I understand right now, yes. So you'd have those items. You have not chosen to move any of those items around. We did, send it out and ask for a vote. I think we got 5 of those back from the 7 of you. That is the order in which they were ranked associated with that scoring that you guys did. And I'm not hearing any changes to that. So if you passed it and there was no change to that, those items above the 18% line, that's where that money would go in those dollar amounts.
Okay, on the sheet then, we would be leaving off patrol bike replacement. That's bicycles for those in attendance, not motorcycles, for the police department. And the brine system that we talked about for the snow removal. Those are the 2 things. Oh, and the 150,000 for the public works unforeseen minor projects. Yeah, sorry, you had a line through. So, without further discussion, if that's binding, then that's binding. Then we're not going to pay for unforeseen minor projects, a brine system, patrol bike replacement, which, except for the patrol bikes, have all been mentioned up here as the reasons why we need to do this. So just keep that in mind while you're saying you can support 18 and not 20, that we're not finishing the process with this vote. It would appear.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. While there was conversation referencing a list of priorities, a list of items, I'm pretty sure 95% of the folks here have no idea what that is. Could we put that up on the screen for reference again? Thank you.
Councilmember Anderson.
No, that's, my understanding is this is our prioritized list of what was sent out to the council that we responded. This is the aggregate of that collection, right, David?
That is correct.
Correct,
Okay, so to me, as much as I believe 20% is what we need, it's the 3 items in red, if this motion passes, that would not be included. Is that what you understand, Mr. Bricky?
That is correct.
And the rest of these would be binding. We don't need to adjust these priorities because everything above 18% would be funded. The 5 police officers, the 9 firefighters, the prosecutor, and my screen's not working up here, so I can't see everything, even with my glasses.
The 10 officers that are dotted would not be included, but the blue and the yellow.
So basically with this motion passing, we're going to increase crossing guard compensation, 9 firefighters, 5 police, the full-time prosecutor to bring us to 4. Convert 1 attorney to a full-time that's part-time, the SCBAs for the fire department, so we're interchangeable with other fire agencies, which to me is kind of I'm surprised that we're in 2018 and our equipment doesn't work with other firefighters. Traffic control budget, getting compliance with our parks backflow preventer, a couple of those, and then the special assignment bike patrol. So everything that I'm seeing up there that's yellow, blue, and green, those would be part of this process, and we don't need to readjust those. Is that?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Lamb.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick clarification. I think what we're voting on is we're not voting on these each individual, those are part of the budget. We're just voting on the 18%, 2.1 million, correct? So you could take this after we say yes to 18%, and you could take the bikes, the patrol bikes, and take it out of one of those other line items as long as we stay within that 2.8 million. I'm just saying, I don't think we're binding ourselves to these individuals. That's what we want, but I don't think we're binding saying you have to do this exactly.
If you're asking me if I can be creative moving towards December on the items that are not listed below the 18%, I think Councilman Jacob has suggested some ways to look at our budget in December. I could try that to move things around, but I would share that well in advance. And what I'm hearing from most of you is what we've been and how we have promoted this to the community is that line at 18% and above is what we're telling the citizens we're going to provide.
Okay. But I just want to make clarification. We're voting on the dollar amount, not on the individual things that we need. Thank you.
Okay, let's vote.
Mayor Riding,
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob,
No.
Councilmember McConaughey,
Aye.
Councilmember Whitelock,
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb,
Yes.
Councilmember Burton.
No.
The vote passes 5-2 in favor.
Move to business items now. Discussion and possible act. Before we do that, I think I would like to suggest we take a 5-minute break. Is council in favor of that?
Yes.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you. 5 minutes. Are there any opposed to that? None. Okay. One nay.
Testing. Okay.
Oh, was it you who?
It was me that
Just
started
did that.
it.
Oh, you started.
And it wasn't
It's
followed.
a good deal.
Just a quick time check. We said 5 minutes about 12 minutes ago.
Test, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. All right.
The base and the mic.
That's the problem.
The base is even attached to the lectern hall.
Reconvene our city council meeting, and we'll go to business items. Discussion and possible action regarding approval resolution 18-140, adopting the budgets for the general fund, the special revenue funds, the capital projects funds, the enterprise funds, and the internal service funds for fiscal year 2018-2019. David Zobel.
What I can tell you, if I can interrupt council.
Please do.
On behalf of Mr. Zobel, the general fund number that's in the documents that have been prepared reflect a 20%. So now that the council has acted to approve an 18%, the general fund number will be we'll need to verify this with the state tomorrow, but it should be $62,175,500. Both Eric and Mr. Zobel, Dave will confirm that tomorrow, but with that change, we will make certain that whatever the mayor signs is reflected by that 18%.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And the other thing that affects this, if you look down on the resolution 18-140, in section 1, right at the end, it says, plus any changes agreed upon at this evening's meeting. So if you will, that means in addition to those changes. So there would be a reduction, and that was expected that they might do something different. So we've accounted for that in the resolution, I think, appropriately.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, I would take a motion. Councilmember Whitelock?
If you loan me that, I'll make a motion. Just loan me your paper.
What do you need?
Your paper. I don't have my agenda. I move that we approve Resolution 18-140, adopting the budgets for the general fund, the special revenue funds, the capital funds, the enterprise funds, and the internal service funds for fiscal year 2018-19.
Councilmember Anderson? Second. We have a motion and a second. Discussion to the motion. Seeing none, let's vote.
Councilmember Anderson?
Yes.
Mayor Riding?
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey? Councilmember Jacob?
No?
Councilmember Lamb?
Yes.
Councilmember Whitelock?
Yes.
Councilmember Burton?
Yes.
Vote passes 6-1 in favor.
Discussion and possible action regarding Resolution 18-141, authorizing the mayor to execute a participation agreement between the City of West Jordan and Peterson Development. Rob Wall, City Attorney.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. In your packets, there is the staff report, and under fiscal and/or asset impact, there's a general description of what this is. Let me just give you a brief description for the benefit of the public. In 2012, the city executed a master development agreement, the Highland Sub-Area Master Plan. You had a copy of the concept plan of that in your packet. Up here on the screen, you can see generally, it's this area here. It included low-density residential, high-density residential, commercial development, storage units, open space, and amenities. Subsequent to that, there have been 6 additional agreements approved by the council. Most recently, the city obtained a grant from Salt Lake County to fund $1.5 million of this road here, which is called Fallwater Drive. The participation agreement that you have in front of you, well, let me back up. You approved an interlocal agreement with Salt Lake County previously to receive this $1.5 million. And now the agreement you have in front of you is an agreement with the developer of this project that says once the $1.5 million is expended, the developer will pick up the remaining cost to not only finish this part of the road here, but also the interchange, and I use that word as not a term of art, that's my word, I'm not sure what the engineers would call it, but there has to be some additional transition work here done on 7800 South. The developer's responsible for that. Other than city staff time in putting this together and then carrying out the project, there are no city funds being spent on this road. It's all county money based on grants the city received from the county, and then whatever additional funding the developer has to pay to finish the project. The project will actually be built in 2 phases. The first phase, it's called the Fallwater Drive Phase 1, is this part, and then the second phase is completing this interchange work. And again, that's my term. It's really not a freeway interchange. I'm just calling that for purposes.
Like an intersection?
It's an intersection plus. It'll have some deceleration and acceleration lanes and so forth because of the volume of traffic on 7800 South. The construction will be done by a contractor. You approved the bid for that last week. The way the funding works is as draw requests come in from the contractor, those will be sent by the county. We will pay the money from Class C road funds for each draw request. The county will then reimburse the city for that same amount of money once they see the draw request and the request from the city up to $1.5 million. Then at that point, the developer will pay the draw requests or reimburse the city for those. That's what this participation agreement is. A couple of other things. The developer, because of the work the city did on obtaining this funding, the developer has also agreed to convey this portion of 5490 West. This shows the approximate location. Here's a better photograph. The city needs this. There have been prior discussions here about what this is for, and if you have additional questions on that, I'm sure Mr. Clegg can discuss those with you on the need for that road. So that's an additional agreement that the developer has made in this agreement. And they will convey that through a deed. Just so, for your information, the actual document, the contract, the participation agreement that you have is about 10 pages. These are all the exhibits that go to that. It's about 535 pages in addition to the contract itself. So you know, the work that we had to put on this was to take all of these 7 agreements that preceded this one and make sure they all integrated together. And so this agreement pulls them all together so that all of the prior obligations of the developer remain in place. We're not waiving any prior responsibilities. In fact, this reaffirms everything that's in here and their obligation to complete Fallwater Drive, even if the $1.5 million isn't adequate to complete the project. Questions?
Councilmember McConaughey first.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you go back a couple slides to
Certainly.
The one that showed 78? One more, I guess before.
This one here?
This one,
Yeah.
Just want to be absolute crystal clear because we have had conversation about the grant from the county for something really close in proximity to this, but about 8600 South, that would be a flyover for Mountain View. I just want to confirm that that's totally separate. This grant doesn't impact that one. We still have that grant. No correlation between the two. This doesn't impact that one.
Mr. Clegg.
That is separate. It doesn't have anything to do with this.
But the question regarding that, wasn't that grant larger? And
I think
now
it was
it's been reduced by 1.5 million?
That is correct. But our lobbyist, Mr. Schertz, is working with the county to make certain that we get it back this year.
And Mayor, that's kind of, the grant came in as a twofold. It came in as I think it was 3.2 million total. 1.7 went to the pedestrian bridge and 1.5 went to Fallwater Drive. So the grant in its entirety was larger, but it was drawn up as a separate, it would be divided once the grant was issued.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Whitelock.
It may be in there and I didn't see it, but is there a date that the developer will be agreeing to completion?
Well, the construction, maybe Mr. Clay could enlighten us on that. There is a construction timeline for the road to be built. And in fact, I think they've already met in their pre-construction meeting, and they're just waiting for us to approve this so they can start digging dirt.
Yeah,
Brian, do you want to?
they met today, I believe, Dave Murphy, and they're just waiting on notice to proceed. I don't know what the build time is in the contract. I haven't had a chance to look at that.
It's my understanding that the infrastructure, the underneath infrastructure has already been installed. The pre-work has been done. They're literally, at this point, ready to go to road. So the water, the sewage, the stormwater already has been installed. So.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. Quick question on this. 78 South is developing and finishing rather quickly. As this development occurs, the south side at least of that road is the curb and gutter and sidewalk are going in. Where does this leave the stretch between the little apartments that are going in on the corner of Mountain View and Fallwater Drive? Is that, I mean, that obviously you would think it's gonna wait for the commercial. Oh, yeah, I can point if you want, sure. It's the green. There's the green. Yeah, where's the green button? Oh, there. Okay. Right here. So between where I can't really see that. Where Fallwater Drive comes in right here and where the apartments are being built right here. Thank you, Scott. This stretch right here, by code or by practice, by what we've done before, would have to wait for this commercial. I think that's what's zoned for right here, right? That commercial would have to go in before that gets developed, or as that gets developed. That'll get developed with the commercial.
Yes, that is correct. That is, I forget which phase, but that will come in the future. I believe, though, and I don't see Dave Murphy here, there is a provision to move that ahead actually faster than those commercial pads go in for safety reasons.
Yeah.
A small stretch of unfinished roadway there is not conducive to a safe environment.
Right. Since you brought that up, what about the one in front of what's their name's property further west? They have the 5-acre piece that's cut out along View right here. The one that's straight north of that, right there, is where on 64th West, where the fourth of the roundabout's been built.
That's a completely separate property. I know that Matt Williams had met with the property owners and their council, and that they have reached an agreement on how to complete and settle all that, and that's being drafted and going to be presented to you here in the near future.
Awesome, awesome. Glad to hear that. And while we're on the subject of narrowly unfinished pieces of road, one more on this map, right here between the roundabout and Mountain View. Obviously, the Copper Rim development will affect that, but between the roundabout and Mountain View, that's another one where it's dangerous because of how it merges after the roundabout.
Right. The Planning Commission actually just reviewed there's some storage units that will be going in.
On the south side.
On the south side, yes.
I meant the north side.
Oh, on the north side? Yeah, that's tied to the Copper Rim development. Okay. And they're moving ahead with Phase 1A, which is the main spine road that goes up through that development. They will be improving part of the north side of 78 in conjunction with that road.
Excellent. Thank you for entertaining me with my relatively unrelated questions.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion. Councilmember Anderson.
I'll move to approve Resolution 18141, authorizing the mayor to execute a participation agreement between the City of West Jordan and Peterson Development.
Councilmember Lamb.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion to the motion. Seeing none, let's vote.
Councilmember McConaughey? Mayor Riding?
Yes.
Councilmember Whitelock?
Yes.
Councilmember Burton?
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb?
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob?
Yes.
The vote passes 7 in favor.
Okay, under remarks, are there any remarks that, I do have one. So Councilmember Burton, you have something?
I do. Do you want me to proceed now?
Please do.
Thank you. I want to thank all those who participated in today's hearing. I know everyone's desires were not met, but I appreciate hearing from each person. And I'd read all the emails that I have received on this topic for this taxation hearing. And I appreciate those who attended my public hearing. I appreciate those who have made phone calls to me and, in other words, corresponded. So thank you all very much. Although everybody's decisions were not voted the way they wanted, I appreciate hearing from them, and I hope they continue to correspond with us. Thank you.
Thank you. One of the things I wanted to talk about is our upcoming legislative meetings with our legislators, and I had requested from council members a idea of things that they wanted to talk about. So let me run down some things that were listed that were sent to me, and if you want to add any more in the next day or two, please send them to me. And because I do want to have the opportunity to maybe think more about these before we meet with them the first time. But the ones that have been sent to me are the following: corridor preservation funding, 70th South widening, the inland ports effect on West Jordan, 1300 West widening, east-west flow on 7800 South and 90th South. That's a big issue, I think, for many people in our city, is the east-west streets here. Road over Oker Mountain to Tooele, regional funding for Ronwood Park, completion of the Mountain View Highway to 201, to 180, and down to Utah County. Regional funding for the Rodeo Arena, regional funding for the Arts Complex, acquisition of the soccer complex. I just have a question about that one when we talk about that later. Development of an auto dealership complex, changing funding mechanism for homeless to be based on sales tax collections rather than population. Role of the city, Salt Lake County and transportation funding. Public noticing requirements, forcing publication through print. And that was quite a discussion on Capitol Hill last year. Land use planning sovereignty, online sales tax distribution, which was mentioned tonight, and also the liquor store mentioned tonight. So from council members, if you have any other that you would like to bring to our legislators' attention that we are concerned and interested about, please let us know so we can keep those, get those added to our list. Any other remarks this evening? Seeing none, we have closed session on here. Oh, you are there, Councilmember Whitelock. Yeah, I was like, okay.
I know, I just had a thought on those. That's a pretty long list to give to our legislators, so at some point, I think we probably should get together and narrow that down so that we can have them focusing on maybe 2 or 3 items that we really want to hammer them on, and we want them to really work for us on, because while there was nothing on the list I disagreed with, it's too much.
Oh, and totally
So
agree.
if we could just work on, have a time when we can do that. Yeah, work meeting's always good.
I think if you remember my email, I'd ask for 3 and how you prioritize them. And I think if we get a bunch in like this, maybe we could send them out and do the same thing that we did in this case with the Truth and Taxation, prioritize those issues so that we can come to our legislators with the things that we as a city, as a council, because I think, and it's been mentioned by almost everybody on council, that the more we can meet with our legislators and feel like there's unanimous decisions in what we're trying to do and accomplish, we are going to have a much better opportunity to get them to work and help us. The other thing too is we want to see what they're working on, to see how we feel what's important for them that would affect our city. So we want to be able to do that as well. So with that, Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you,
I gotta
Mayor.
quit look at this more.
So a couple thoughts. I know we've got a number of members of the council who are new this year. I think it would be beneficial for us to meet to discuss what our priorities have been over the past 4 or 5 years. Many of these things that we've worked on have taken a substantial amount of time to make some progress, but we're not quite over the finish line yet. We brought up tonight, for example, efforts that were required to change state law so that we could at least have the opportunity to have an auto dealership here. But if people don't understand the history and know what's been worked on, that might not even make people's radars going forward. So I think it would be beneficial to have a chance as a council to talk about what's been done in the past. And then I would also like to meet, like Councilmember Whitelock said, to kind of narrow that list down. I don't want our first meeting to discuss our legislative priorities to include the legislators, because then as they see all the back and forth, they're left scratching their head thinking, well, they don't really know which direction the ship is going to go. And with this being, I'll bite my tongue there. But I think it would be more beneficial for us to figure out what those priorities are first. I would say probably top 10 to 12, just because we have different folks that can focus on different areas, plus we can work with our our lobbyist, and some of these things tend to overlap. But yeah, the list is a bit large, but many of those are things that have been tackled previously and need some follow-up. Some of those are new, some of those are long-term 20 to 40-year plan. But I think it would be beneficial to meet first without the legislative delegation to get our bearings and make sure we're all on the same page.
Well, let me ask the question of everyone then. I think the first meeting we had, and Melanie, maybe you can help us out with the date, September 4th. Do we want to move that meeting with our legislators off a couple of weeks and have that meeting that night, the night we meet as a council to formalize our proposal to them? So feel free to speak at this point.
I will likely not be able to attend on the 4th, whether we have legislators there or not. I have an other obligation on that night, so I'll just email you as much as I can, give you what information I can, but I won't be there in person.
Chris?
Thank you, Mayor. My preference would be that we invite the state legislators on perhaps the evening of the 26th, and we discuss this on the council meeting scheduled for the 12th. In the 11th, thank you. I forgot about that. My work schedule doesn't permit availability the other 2 weeks. But I would, what we had done with Mayor Johnson that I thought worked really well is we had council meetings start on the regular council night, but it started 1 hour early. So we met at 5, we took care of essential business, and we wrapped up by 5:45. We let staff know that there would be a hard stop at 5:50. And then we gathered in the Shore Gallery at 6 o'clock with the legislators, and we had a small light refreshments with them, and then went until probably 9 or 10 o'clock discussing the priorities that we had identified and talked a little bit about game plan, who we thought would be best suited to tackle what. I like the idea of trying to have it on our regular council meetings. My work has, I have to make obligations and commitments for my work schedule 3 months out. So when we have things that are not on council weeks, that almost guarantees my inability to attend. So I'd really like the opportunity to be there.
That's why we moved them to the council week instead of...
Well, even with that, I have nights where I'll fly out on Sunday and I'll fly back Wednesday afternoon and get here just barely in time.
Well, if we could, kind of carrying on a conversation here, if we had everybody willing to not be so verbose on those evenings, that we could go and end on a hard time frame so that we could meet with them. We met from 5 to 5:50. That my biggest concern, and the reason why I actually set these up opposite of council meeting nights, was because of the hesitation I have of being able to, as a council, to finish on a hard time frame. I've just watched this happen.
I think if we set a hard time saying we must be done by this point, I think it'll help things along. The other issue is I worry about falsely putting an unnecessary end time on some of the conversation. Yeah, there's times where we could cut our comments shorter, but if we leave out a fair amount of dialogue, we're not doing any favors to the residents. If I think this is the right way to go, but I'm more worried about the clock than making an argument and then something fails, that's on me as a council member for not doing my job to try and get a majority to support that.
So that was my concern about trying to do this in 50 minutes, a council meeting in 50 minutes.
That's why we limit it to essential items, and non-essential we schedule for another meeting.
So, feel free to step in and talk.
I would, but we can't all talk at the same time, so, you know, microphones and heat. I'm on. Okay, I'll put us on. So I have much the same feelings as Chris. My schedule is going to change such for the next about 3 months. I'll be much less available. You would. Okay. She just wanted to shut me up. I just know it. She's taking Jim's not be so verbose to heart and pointing it at me. No, I'm just kidding. So, yeah, my work schedule in the evenings is going to be tougher for about the next 3 months on non-council regularly scheduled nights. So, just to keep that in mind, I'd rather do it on regular scheduled council meeting nights as well. It would just work better for me. And that, even if that means starting at 5, I guess, for this special purpose, we can do that. So,
I'll jump in.
Let me jump for a second. September 11th, we moved our council meeting from the 12th to the 11th.
From the 12th to the 11th because
That
of
was
the
the
league.
league.
Right, I know that's the league meeting, but I remember we had that discussion for the one in St. George. I don't remember having a
One in
discussion.
September also.
It was September 2nd.
We did, yeah.
At
We
the
did.
same time.
Okay, I think I opposed both of those. So,
February.
I need to update my calendar then. So I have a problem on the 11th because I thought that was open. So now because I do schedule things in the evening on nights other than council nights. I think the first meeting, I think the league's meeting, we could be here that evening. Yeah, it's in Salt Lake. It's not very far to drive from Salt Lake to West Jordan. And we could have our normal council meeting on the normal night where people are used to it being. I would prefer, and I would.
I think it was moved because there is something Wednesday night.
There's an event, but it's not critical for us to be there.
But I think we've already made the decision to do the 11th many months ago.
We did.
We did.
We did. So if
So-
there's enough people who want to change that,
I don't.
Okay.
I don't think there are.
As far as the meeting goes, I agree with the mayor that we should, we need more time than 50 minutes, but in this case, since Chris and Zach have both voiced that they cannot be there the week before, I am for having this on the 11th at 5 o'clock.
I'm going to voice the concern. We're here to serve the public, and I get that we all have jobs, and I'm not supporting my family, so I understand that makes a difference. But our regular meetings are really long anyway. So if we can't ever schedule extra meetings, I don't know how we're going to accomplish moving our city forward personally. There's gotta be some time that we can come together, and I worry if what we're going to do is have a discussion on about 20 some odd items in 50 minutes to come to a consensus. This body doesn't typically come to a
We can just make
consensus
quicker
quite that
decisions.
quickly.
I think we can do it.
Well, I don't want to be before my higher elected officials and not have a cohesive game plan, because that's a plan to fail. We need to have a cohesive plan. We need to know who's going to bring up what topic with them, how it's going to go down. If we want to have a good working relationship with our elected officials and have it be productive, we have to be organized and know what we're doing, and 50 minutes, I'm sorry, I don't think that's going to happen. So if your schedules, then you shouldn't have probably any meetings for work on the 12th. So if we were going to miss something at ULCT, which I think it is beneficial to be to their extra things, because networking is very important in moving our city forward as well. But perhaps we could look at that night then. because then you should, I would think, be in town. Those are just my thoughts. I just am worried that 50 minutes before a regular meeting is not gonna give us time.
If we took Councilmember McConaughey's suggestion that we hold a regular council meeting on the 11th and use that time to formulate this plan, then we meet with the legislators on the 26th. We will have a plan together. But I think I'd see where the problem could be too, is that
You guys have Chris's suggestion backwards.
Yeah,
Instead of
no.
have 50 minutes of regular council meeting and
Yes.
then go into the meeting with the legislators and take all night.
on the 11th?
On
You're not
whatever
talking
night
about
we
the
do
11th,
this.
though.
So a meeting sometime prior to when we meet with the legislators, in a regular council meeting, that's when we would discuss what our priorities are gonna be.
That's what I
And we'd
just-
probably anticipate a couple hours for that conversation. I mean, in all seriousness, at least an hour and a half, 2 hours to talk through that. I think it's appropriate for that conversation as to what our legislative priorities are to be held in the open public meeting so that the public has a chance to hear what we're concerned about. Then the night that we meet with the legislators, we have our regular city council meeting that we have for only 55 minutes, and we have only required items on there. Consent, whatever the consent items are, and if there are one or two quick business items that are necessary, we have those on that particular night. And then we wrap up the regular council meeting, then we meet with the legislative delegation from 6 p.m. on, and that's when we share with them, okay, here's what our priorities are. Since we've already discussed that as a council, Mr. Bricky, Mr. Wall, Mr. Linares would probably be driving that conversation because they would have had all the conversation, they would have heard the dialogue, and they'd be able to put together, okay, from what we heard with the council, this is what we're looking at, and it's primarily a presentation from them to the legislative delegation, with our role there being to add emphasis or clarifying points where necessary.
Got that. So if we do this on the 26th with them, okay, when do you want to meet beforehand to spend that 2 to 3 hours you're talking about?
As a business item on the 11th?
Sure.
I mean,
Is
we
that
could,
what you're?
if you want to do it on the 11th on our council meeting, that's just as well. Would you want to start any earlier than 6 p.m. on the 11th?
No?
Okay, on the 26th, we start at 5 p.m. and go to 5:50? Everybody in agreement there? Yes. All right, Melanie, would you work with Heather to reschedule our legislators?
Have they already RSVP'd, and have we got?
Some of them have, yes.
But if we're not ready, then it's better to push back if we're not prepared than it is to have a meeting with them and us not ready.
Yeah, but we have several scheduled that were scheduled with them, so.
Well, the only one we're looking at changing right now is the 4th. Unless we decide to change all of them.
But maybe you
which
don't
is
have the
Councilmember
4th.
McConaughey's request.
Maybe you just move it to the 9th. You have them come on the 9th, where you have them scheduled next.
Mayor, I know I'm not one of you, but can I interject a couple of thoughts?
Please.
You've said some very good things, and it's true, and I'd just like to emphasize a couple of things. If we go to the Hill with more than 3 or 4 priorities, we will not be successful with anything. The cities that are most successful go up there with 2 or 3 major priorities, and that's what they focus on. The second thing is there's a way to get there and yet address many more of the things you've talked about. I would suggest that before we meet with the legislators, and when you do it, that's got to be up to your schedules, that we invite our lobbyists and Cameron Deal here and send them ahead of time what you just read about the concerns, so they can look through those, and then have them come and have a roundtable with them so they can help us kind of put some reality into the current tenor of the legislature, and also with regard to the league, a number of those issues they're fighting, and we don't need to spend our political chits on those. There's only a certain amount of political headroom you have, and as big as this city is, there's a limit. And if you don't carefully select those based on who's fighting what battles and which ones you want to lead on, you'll dilute any opportunity to lead on anything. And a good tool to do that is to get those. We have 2 really good lobbyist groups, and maybe we schedule them one after the other. You know, one will cover road and transportation issues, and the other will cover whatever issues they cover. And with Mr. Deal here to hear it all, to be able to share with us what the league's going to be focusing on. So that will then allow you to really pick the 2 or 3 that you really may be out on your own on, that you really need to push with the legislators. And then I'd also suggest that what a couple of you said, if, just as an observer over many, many years, if you go to your legislators with some very refined, with 3 or 4 issues, with very well-refined justifications for them, they will be much more successful in lobbying for us. So in addition to scheduling, those are just some thoughts you may want to consider as you start to put this together.
If we do it in that respect, it will be very, very difficult to do that in conjunction with city council.
I guess it would depend on the schedule of those, of the lobbyists and Mr. Deal. I'm not saying you have to, I'm just saying we'll be much more effective if we've refined our process to that end.
So is there any way we could meet on the 12th? Gentlemen, Jack, Jacobs?
Well, let me ask you a question. If we had council on the 11th, then would you want to meet on the 12th to do this?
That's what I'm saying.
But we won't get Cameron, I don't think, on the 12th.
Oh, no, we won't get Cameron on the 12th.
I
Never
would say
mind,
put
you're right.
council back on the 12th and have the workshop meeting, or whatever you want to call it, on the 11th. If we're going to meet both those days, the council should be on the 12th to avoid confusion.
So to answer your question, I'm gonna be working Saturdays, so to do an extra council meeting, I'm taking my day off during the week based on whenever that meeting's gonna be. So, because I'm gonna be an hour away for the next 3 months, my commute, I'm not gonna be able to be here until 7 on a day that I work. So, you don't have to plan around me. I'll make it when I can make it. I won't make it when I can't make it. And on these special meetings, you know, they are what they are. So, there.
Let's do it all on the 12th.
You can't do it all on the 12th.
We can't do it all on one night.
Yeah.
We've already determined that, and if we want Cameron here, you're exactly right, the 12th is not gonna work. I don't know what I was thinking.
Okay, before we move ahead with a date on this, let's talk to Cameron and our lobbyists. And let's see if we can pin them down to, and Mr. Brick, if you could help us in working through a date like that, where we get Cameron and our lobbyists together and see if we can work through and then get back to council on that.
I can do that tomorrow and try to get an email back to you by Friday. No, tomorrow's Wednesday, Thursday. If I've heard back from everybody quickly.
Everybody pretty much okay with trying to do it that way? To get them on board first and to see what they can do and then see how we can try to meet their schedule as well. Because I think it's critical. Mr. Wall's right, that we need to have them there.
And if they're available to meet later in the day, then we could still do Councilman McConaughey's suggestion and maybe start it later and get the 2-hour council meeting in and then meet with them afterwards.
Okay, let's see what happens. Okay, let's move on. We have a closed session, correct?
There's nothing that can't wait till next Wednesday.
Hallelujah. Okay, then I will take a motion.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have to vote? Or we just say aye? Aye. Aye. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We adjourn.